Okay. Should be live. Is there a live chat right now? Is that not working out? Let's see here. Comment if you see this. Comment. Let me know that the live chat is working. But it seems like it is, but I don't see it. So give it a comment and see if that might trigger it or something like that on my end. But please hit the like button. It helps fuel the algorithm. We are definitely going to have a great stream tonight. I'm very excited about talking about this. I was planning on doing a different stream, but there's no way to not do this stream tonight, so we are going to do this one. But comment in the live chat. Let me know. Okay, well, here. Hopefully this does not interrupt the stream. I apologize if it does, but I'm not seeing a... let me see here. Pop out chat. Okay, I got the chat. That's fine. I got it. Cool. All right, so hello, Paulina. Would be nice. Hello. But yeah, hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm, and we will get started. So tonight we are going to discuss the UFOs in the news because it is a story that is blowing up everywhere, apparently, except CNN, MSNBC, and, you know, the main, I don't want to say mainstream, but I guess you could say the not Fox News legacy news channels. So I guess you could say mainstream, but I don't really like that term. But it has been everywhere, and there is a specific thing that has sparked that, and it is the coming forward of a man who was an intelligence officer who then worked for the Pentagon and then is now claiming to be a whistleblower, and that the United States government and or private military contractors are hiding recovered craft that are not made by human beings, and they are trying to reverse engineer them. He worked for the UFO task force for the Pentagon. We'll get more into that in a bit. But his name is David Grusch, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And there was an interview that was done with him on News Nation. And I cannot seem to find the full one on News Nation's YouTube channel. It was there for a bit, but I think they took it down. So it is a bit tough to find the full one on YouTube. It is out there, but mostly it's a bunch of clips. And I think that News Nation has the full interview on their website, but they just want you to pay for it, so they're making you pay. But it was a great discussion, but a great interview that he did. It was with Ross Coulthart, who he's been on plenty of different channels related to this subject, and including Kurchai Munkel's Theories of Everything YouTube channel, I think at least a couple times, but... and he has won many awards for journalism across multiple different outlets, and he was the one who sat down and broke the story and did the interview with David Grusch. It honestly did not reveal much that was new, if you were already up on the topic, but nonetheless it's interesting, and there are people that are spiraling over this, and there are people very excited over this, and we're going to talk about how to approach this topic, because one thing that I will say about this specific topic is that it is probably the most frustrating topic that I have ever looked into. I personally was not a UFO person. I don't consider myself a UFO person, but people around me probably do, just because I'm more interested in it than your average person, but that doesn't mean that it is I don't know. It's not a topic that I think should define me, but it is one that I cannot be agnostic on because I have seen certain things, and I will talk about that during the stream, and I have footage that we'll go over and share from myself, from some friends, from other people who I don't know but witnessed the same thing as me and filmed it as well in different parts of Los Angeles. So we're going to go over that. But this topic, like I said, even though I have witnessed things firsthand that are very interesting, I am still not somebody who has been in this topic for very long, just a few years, ever since the government videos were released in, I think, 2019. That's when I kind of started getting into this topic. But I was interested in the Bob Lazar story many years ago because I like aircraft and aerospace technology, and I study that a lot. I will say definitely a lot. I like the history of, the SR-71 and the F-22 and all the stealth fighters and things like that. I study that stuff, and I have since I was a kid, and I lived next to an Air Force base growing up, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. It has the largest stockpile of military jets, maybe in the world, but definitely in the United States. So I grew up around that stuff, and then I was researching, classified aircraft and came across Area 51 and when I was a kid, and researched a bit and came across Bob Lazar's story, and then I kind of forgot about this topic for many, many years. I did believe him based on the fact that certain aspects of his story have been corroborated over the years. I think that his record at Los Alamos is pretty legitimizing of it, at least that his part of his story, and that part of his story backs up other parts of his story. If you work at Los Alamos Labs, you probably could get a job at Area 51. But then I forgot about the topic until 2019, and the New York Times article came out with the Pentagon videos that had been released or leaked, and then later were released and confirmed by the Pentagon. I think it was 3 different videos with fighter pilots. I think they're mostly F-18 pilots who were in the Navy, and some of them were on the East Coast and some of them were from the West Coast. But they were very interesting, and I kind of dove into this topic after that a bit, and it has been a ride. And it is, like I said, it is the most complicated and most frustrating topic to ever research, because there are certain aspects of it that are fascinating. They are absolutely fascinating. It doesn't matter what your worldview is, they are fascinating if you give this an honest look. At the same time, it's very, very rare that anything has ever come out that is really, I guess you could say, proof, but we're going to talk about what is proof today, because that is what people keep saying. We need proof, we need proof, we need proof. I don't think that that's an easy thing to do in this subject, for the most part. And we're going to apply some of the aspects of sentient singularity theory and the framework of thinking that comes from it to this topic, and see how, if there's not a better way of approaching it than just whether or not somebody sounds convincing, or whether or not photos are ever revealed, pics, or it didn't happen, that kind of thing. Does that even matter? If there were pics, and would you even believe them? Should you even believe them? We're going to talk about all this stuff, but we're going to go over some of the claims from the interview that were made by David Grusch and the clips of that. And I've seen Mick West and Michael Shermer spiraling on Twitter, and I like Michael Shermer. I don't know much about Mick West, but I honestly, if you know this channel, you know that I think skepticism is an intrinsically, logically flawed way of thinking about the world. And I do not like the term, because the term dictates how we approach a systematic examination of any claim. And it frames it in a way that is not actually a logical way of looking at claims that you initially would not believe, or instinctually do not believe, or due to current information that you have, your default assumption is that you do not assume them to be true. So we're going to talk a bit more about how is the proper way to examine this stuff, what should be the next steps, and what is going on in the UFO community, because I'm not really that much part of the UFO community at all, but I definitely have been looking at it for the past couple years, like a lot of people, and it is a fascinating. Sorry, that's my dog, but it is a fascinating, rabbit hole to go down. So this is Michael Shermer's YouTube channel, Skeptic, for Skeptic Magazine, and he has been posting a lot on Twitter after this dropped, and this interview. And not only has he done that, he has also commented on Steven Greer's recent press conference that he gave, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. It's extremely long. I will link it below at the end. I'll link links to every clip that we show in the description, but there is a link to Michael Shermer and Michael Shellenberger's discussion that we're going to mostly look at, which is just, how do we approach this topic, really? Because everybody's talking about the claims. The claims are not new. It has been, I don't even know how, 80 to 90 years that people have claimed the United States government and or private corporations and contractors have been hiding a crash retrieval program for technology that is non-human in origin, and a reverse engineering program that has supposedly been ongoing. This is nothing new. It has been going on since before Roswell, not just starting there, but before Roswell. Roswell's story is very interesting. We're not going to get too into it tonight because I've talked about it before on a stream that I did called UFOs versus Wasps. And in that specific stream, if you're interested in what I think these beings are, and like if they are here, and some of my thought, kind of speculations more, and I admit it's speculation, but it is an attempt to do it logically through, if we assume this, then we can deduce that most likely that this would be true, and this would be true, and this would be true. So I kind of do that in that stream, and if you're interested in watching it, it is on my YouTube channel. So this one is going to be more based on what's currently going on, what should be the next steps for society, for the government, for anybody investigating this. I actually know people who are on the UFO, the committee to investigate these claims, basically that will investigate the claims of UFO crash retrieval programs and whistleblowers, who are congressmen and women. I have not spoken to them about it, but I hope that they do a thorough job, and I would imagine that they would. They are. If there's government officials that I would want working on this a bit, probably it would be a good one. But so here we go. This is their stream that we're going to talk about, UFO whistleblowers. But before we even do that, we're going to look at the whistleblower interview themselves specifically. So here we go.
Intelligence officials in the U.S. defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
Grusch sitting down with award-winning
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the U.S. defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
Grusch sitting down with award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who's reporting for News Nation and has spent years reporting on the UFO question.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
Grusch alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the intelligence community inspector general. NewsNation has confirmed David Grusch's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators. He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth.
Okay, so there is a lot to unpack in this story. And it's very relevant to my work, actually. And in many ways, more than one way. But the way that I think is most interesting, actually, is how to think about this. Because sentient singularity theory is a theory of information processing. It is a theory of mind. And the processes and structures of mind and how a mind processes information and orients itself in the world. So our goal is to orient ourselves in the UFO topic, because there are countless claims out there, and every single one is, unless you are working on a crash retrieval program right now and you're not, you're keeping that a secret, and you just happen to be watching this, that's pretty cool if that's true. But then you actually have not very much experience with this topic, other than hearing about it from others. And you will hear everything, which means everything that you hear is going to be fantastic sounding. It's going to sound totally abnormal and not in alignment with your current everyday experience. And it's difficult to orient yourself in topics in which you are studying something that is not part of your everyday experience, because the inclination is to dismiss it. But you also can't do that if you want to truly understand whether or not the topic is even worth looking into more. So this is bringing us to the next thing that I want to take a look at, which is skepticism. We are not going to be skeptical on this channel. Skepticism is a flawed ideology. It is a flawed way of thinking about the world, and I understand why it doesn't seem like it is, but it absolutely is. So, skepticism. The belief that some or all human knowledge is impossible, since even our best methods of learning about the world sometimes fall short of a certain perfect certainty. Skeptics argue it is better to suspend belief than to rely on the dubitable, I have no idea what that word is. Products of reason. Okay, so I don't know what that means. Let's look that up. Means the conclusions. Okay. So basically, it means to not have a belief about something, no matter what, no matter even if reason supports it. Basically, that's what it looks like here, rather than rely on the concluding products of reason. Interesting. Doubtful as to the truth of something. That certain knowledge is impossible. Okay, well, see, the issue, there's so many issues with all of these different, I guess, definitions, but you will see the result of skepticism when you look at a lot of, the interviews of Michael Shermer. And I like Michael Shermer. I think he is actually a genuine person. I think he always thinks about the world in a way that I think is actually logical way of thinking. I don't even think it is thinking. I think it's like your mind is tricking itself into thinking. But I think that he is a genuine person on these topics that he approaches, and I admire that he does, try and tackle them, and that he is kind to people who when he is interviewing them on various topics. But I very often disagree with how he approaches pretty much most things because I don't agree with skepticism. So this is how to think about the world, according to sentient singularity theory, which is the only way to think, actually, basically. And there's so much implications in this, and this is the first model I ever made of the thinking process. And there's two ways to kind of look at this, and or start this. And one of them is you have to know your base assumption about the world that you have to use as your guiding north, point on a compass that you can judge everything else by. And that is the answer to the most fundamental question that there is. And in order to find out what is the most fundamental assumption that you can have, the thing that you most confidently know to be true, and there is a series of questions that leads to one answer, and that answer is always I am. And this just means that you exist. The truest thing that you know is that you exist, which implies something about information. It means that you must prioritize first-hand information above second-hand information when you're putting them two in a hierarchy. Second-hand information cannot be put on the same level as first-hand information. You must believe first-hand information above second-hand information. This is very contradictory to our current education system, so many people actually have a very hard time with this nowadays. So the next thing that you have to do when you're approaching a topic is you have to be aware of your default assumption, because you can't actually take no stance on something if you're going to try and examine it. Now, you can have no stance on it if you're not going to try and examine it, and it's not something that you have any first-hand interaction with, like me and Bigfoot. I do not study Bigfoot, and I have never seen one, and because I don't study it and I've never seen one, I can be agnostic about Bigfoot. But as soon as you try and look at an issue, you have to take your default assumption about it, which you will have a default assumption, a way that you lean, and you have to reject the current default status and assume the opposite of it is true, and then look for evidence. So if you're a skeptic about UFOs, you can't be like, my default assumption is that this is fake, because you end up like Mick West and Michael Shermer very often, and many other people, and it's not their fault, unless I don't know, people have accused Mick West of being a disinformation agent and things like. I don't know if that's true, and I have no opinion on it, but it doesn't matter, because that doesn't help. Even if that would be true, it doesn't matter to this discussion. So the reality is that no matter what he's promoting, if it's genuine or not, it is a flawed way of thinking, and is what it shows, and that, or a flawed way of approaching a topic that gives the appearance of being logical, I guess, but it's not. And that is, if your default assumption is that something is that UFOs don't exist, basically, then you have to you cannot just go with that and then look for evidence that UFOs don't exist, because you can find anything that will reinforce that idea, and you won't actually end up looking at the opposing narrative with humility, with self-honesty. And it keeps you from doing it because you're just looking for information that you actually already have. Because why would you continue to look for evidence that, like, if you didn't believe UFOs existed and you thought they were all swamp gas, tricks of the light, clouds, whatever, balloons, then your default assumption, your default set of actions after that is to just continue to look for information that you probably already have, and that doesn't actually expand your viewpoint at all. And because why would you, if you have a certain belief about something, then it's because you have certain bits of information that already are making you come to that belief. So in order to test the opposing belief, you have to look for information that you don't have, and in order to do that, you have to assume the assumption that would be backed by that information that you would want to go look at is true. And so you have to take your current default status, if you don't believe in UFOs, assume the opposite is true, which means you have to assume UFOs do exist. You have to assume they are of non-human origin, if in this topic at least. You can't just be like, well, yeah, I believe UFOs exist. They're unidentified flying objects. That's it. Okay, that's nothing, obviously. That's just a waste of even your own breath to say that. But, and obviously the government has classified technology, so that's not the question here. The question is do technological vehicles of non-human origin exist around us? Have they been recovered by the government? Have they flown around? Are they flying around us? Do they crash ever? Like that kind of thing. And so if you do believe in UFOs, though, and it's your default status is to believe in this stuff, you have to look for evidence that it's not true. You have to assume it's not true and look for evidence. But it's hard to do that too, because you have to you can't just look for evidence that this is fake, because you can't actually find evidence of something that's non-existent. But what you can find if you can find evidence of a counter story that is an actual story. But you can't say there is no story and then look for evidence of there is no story, because there's no evidence for there is no story. But if you assume the opposing narrative, the conventional narrative usually, is true, then you can look for evidence of that. So my default assumption, I will say, on this topic historically is, until the past few years of examining it, according to this model that I'm talking about, this way of thinking, which is the only way of thinking, my default assumption was to not believe it, other than Bob Lazar. But like I said, I didn't think about Bob Lazar for the last 20 years of my life. I have not thought really about Bob Lazar. But when I was a little kid, I did believe him because I looked into the story a bit, and I didn't necessarily want to believe him, but I did believe him. I've always thought the idea of there being beings like aliens, I don't think I don't think we should speculate as to where they're from at first. I mean, you can do that, and I have done that, but I don't think that's the primary thing that we should be looking at in this examination. You get there after, if you assume that they exist and you look for evidence of that, you find out, that it's worth continuing and maybe entertaining the idea that it's true. Then you can start not entertaining the idea that it's true, but you've gotten to the point where you want to think about this further, about what these things are and various aspects of it, which we'll do a bit tonight. Then you have to get to, you're assuming that they're here, basically, even if it's just for the sake of argument. But yeah, I think that this is the way to approach it. You can't be a skeptic and believe it's not there. But if you do want to look for a counter narrative, and we'll talk about that tonight, then you have to look for the an alternative story that is an explanation. It can't just be, well, oh yeah, they just they misunderstood what they saw. That's not an explanation. But if there was a separate story, like the Roswell story, where the military first said that it was a UFO, then the military said that it was, or they said it was a flying saucer that they had recovered, then they said it was a weather balloon, and then they said it was Project Mogul, which was a classified program with balloons that had sensors on them measuring nuclear detonations, I think. If you want to look for evidence of Roswell not being what is the mainstream explanation, you have to assume that it was some type of, or you have to assume that a craft of non-human origin crashed and look for evidence of that. If you do assume that kind of already, and that's your default assumption, and you want to test this one, you assume that the conventional story of its Project Mogul is true, and then you look for evidence of that, because there is evidence of both of those being true. You can't just be like, I don't believe anything crashed, or like that I don't believe that it's true. You can't just say that and then look for no evidence. You have to look for evidence of something. So you have to assume something, and not every story is one in which you can do this. But with the Roswell one, you can. But if somebody just makes random claims about something that is, there's no alternative story to it, it's just you either think they're lying or you think they're not, there isn't really a way to look for evidence that they're lying unless there's more to the story that you can kind of like look at. But regardless, this is the Pentagon's claims, and then we will get into the stream of the night.
And just within the last 10 minutes or so, the Pentagon has released a statement to News Nation about this report. They say to date, ARROW has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. ARROW is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. ARROW, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid ARROW in its congressionally mandated historical review. ARROW's historical review of records and testimonies is ongoing and due to Congress by June 2024, and ARROW welcomes the opportunity to speak with any former or current employee or contractor who believes they have information relevant to this historical review. And Elizabeth, we know that David Grusch
Okay. So why are there so many whistleblowers coming out right now? And it's multiple. Somewhere in the Steven Greer, release, and just, people say all kinds of things about everybody. I'm trying to assume everybody has good intentions and is being honest. Otherwise, not gonna, at least, as honest as they think. They're not intentionally lying. At least I don't think. We all lie to ourselves sometimes, but I am taking them all seriously, including the ones from Steven Greer's, public release. And I know people have all kinds of opinions on him, and I have my own. But I think that it is clear that he has been onto things in the past, and that have been kind of revealed over time. And he has presented at least 3 or 4 whistleblowers, and they have given their stories. And then David Grusch is now doing that too. But what's interesting about all of these, and we'll get more into it, is that they are all presenting evidence to the government. It's not just a story. There's also documents that that are associated with each one of these stories, and coming from each one of these whistleblowers that is being presented to the government. Either it is the location that they should check out where this tech was stashed, some classified location, or it is names associated with people on the project, or it is names of the project, and that is fairly new, other than a couple times in the past that it has happened and went largely ignored. So not really, but like by the national United States national media, it went largely ignored. but not by the rest of the world or local media. So here we go. First clip, now that all that is out of the way.
And who are these people you talk? How did you find these people to talk to?
Or how did they find you?
Yeah, and I should say, too, I think that the way my interpretation of that last part is that the Pentagon approved the statements not because they're saying that they're correct or that they agree with them, but that he's not revealing classified information and saying those things. So read into that what you will. My piece is a pretty straight reporting piece. I interviewed several people who are either current or former senior military or intelligence officials, either in government or contractors, who verified the core claim that Grusch is making, which is that there are craft that have a non-human origin. My sources say there's at least 12. One person said 12 to 15. These people I found very credible, sane, very intelligent, confirmed that they are in positions to know these things, or at least they could be in positions to know these things, I should say. I interview a lot of crazy people in my work in homelessness. I interview people that talk about aliens that are clearly psychotic, and the experience is very different from talking to these people. I also talk to people on the street I've recorded interviews with people on the street talking about string theory that are just that are basically part of a kind of babble or word salad, as we say. That was not my experience interviewing these people. These people were afraid to give their names. I also protected them additionally by protecting their genders and by not revealing which agencies or contractors they work for. They told very specific stories that I think are very interesting. I mean, one person told a story saying that there is an effort to reverse engineer these craft, that it's been difficult to do because of the compartmentalization and the stovepiping to prevent scientists and engineers from understanding where the materials are from. And so there was an initiative proposed by a contractor to a major aerospace corporation that was then hotly and somewhat, I think, emotionally rejected by an agency that also this person would not name. There were descriptions of craft. There was one person who did describe the entities, the alleged non-human pilots, but I decided not to write about that because I just felt like you got to draw the line somewhere. I couldn't.
Michael,
I just didn't quite figure
that would be
out.
pretty huge.
Yeah,
but that would be even huger
the
than
other people
some
didn't know
unknown
about
craft.
that part. Yeah, the other people didn't know about that. And there was also different views of whether there had been any success reverse engineering the craft, with some people saying that there had been success and some people not knowing. I really tried my best in this article to just report it straight without a lot of editorializing beyond my editorializing, which I did at the very end of the article and in my subsequent interviews, where I say, if there's nothing there, and in fact, the more strongly you believe that nothing's there, the more strongly you should want to go into various facilities and look to disprove that there's nothing there. So it seems like I'm always interested in finding practical agreement, and I think that people that are believers and people that are skeptics and people that are undecided like myself should all support looking and having a proper investigation. And as you know, this is an area, there's no doubt that the U.S. Military has covered up information about its own investigations for decades. This is a matter of public record. This was revealed again in 2017, but one of my most, I'm recently obsessed with a 1978 New York Times Magazine article about the U.S. government cover-up of these things. Sometimes it was to cover up secret weapons programs, but sometimes it was to cover up objects that they could not identify or anomalous phenomena they could not identify. So, yeah, is that a helpful overview?
Okay, so one thing that's interesting is that he said that I agree with is he said, if you disbelieve in this, you should want more to go check. Like, go check the hangars. Go check these places. Somebody on Michael Shermer's Twitter, I responded to something that he had said. I forgot what it was, but they had asked me, as a response, what do you suggest? Maybe it was Mick West. I don't remember. And I said, maybe somebody who is in Congress and some of these people who are in charge of investigating this should go to these locations. Like, maybe they should go to Papoose Lake south of Groom Lake and look in the hills above it and see if there's hangars that are similar to what Bob Lazar had suggested. Maybe they will be empty. Maybe they won't be empty. Maybe the hangars will be destroyed and buried in the dirt. And Area 51 has and the areas around that do have a reputation of just burying classified things in the sand when they're done with them or when they want to cover it up. That is basically confirmed. There's been court cases about them burying, hazardous materials and leftovers from stealth aircraft and things like that, and just burying it in the sand and lighting it on fire, and it causing, deaths of people, who won their court case, actually, I think, eventually. But it took like 13 years, for the government to admit that the base even existed. So that's a hard thing with this topic too. Is there was this court case that existed. I forgot it, but what it was called specifically. Maybe we can look. Area 51, burn trash. Okay, so yeah, there were people that had serious reactions to exposure to a lot of the smoke and material that was coming from this trash burning that was going on at Area 51. And one guy died, and this was many years ago, and his wife hired a lawyer. They tried to sue, and the Air Force, and the Air Force's response was, what base? Because it was only 2013, I think, where Barack Obama declassified the existence of Area 51. I mean, everybody knew it existed, but like the official line was, what base? And now it's, oh yeah, that base, don't go there, which is very different. And so that is a tough thing, is if you show up and, the hangars are empty. It's like, well, where's what was in here? Where's the craft? It's like, what craft? So that's very possible, but you can find evidence probably by going to these places and looking. And a lot of them have been provided. I saw on Steven Greer's press conference, he handed over a list of locations and stories that were associated with certain locations to Congress and members of Congress and other members of the government. That's what we need, is like hard things to investigate. Things that can leads that are actually pursuable, not just do you believe it or do you not believe it. And I will say, even that press release with Steven Greer, I know Michael Shermer had big problems with it, and so did others, and I understand people's thoughts on Greer, but he does have a track record. But this time, I will say, I was very impressed with the entire thing. That doesn't mean I believe everything that was said, but I definitely don't think that a lot of these people were lying who were up there, and it seemed like Greer and his team were actually releasing to the government to investigate, actual evidence, and some of it was shown publicly, some of it was lists of names and projects and things like that. Some of it was not. Was shown but was redacted for confidentiality, and he had said multiple times, all of this has now been provided, and I do believe that. And the reason why all of this is happening is because whistleblower protection, UFO. Congress passed in 2021 and 2022 the Whistleblower Protection Improvement Act, which is to help protect people who have supposedly been in these classified programs and who have signed NDAs and want to inform the public that there's something being hidden illegally, even from our elected officials, and but are afraid of the legal and personal repercussions of doing so. So they passed a law to protect people who might be involved in these projects. So now everybody's coming forward. So it makes a lot of sense, actually, that this is all happening at once. And I think that that's very important, that you do protect these people if they're going to come forward, personally, with insofar as their safety, insofar as their finances, and also legally. They must be protected. If we want to learn the truth of this, you have to do that. And I think it was Steven Greer had stated that one of the people that has gone on the record, and that record has been turned over to Congress, signed an 80-year non-disclosure agreement. 80 years. I definitely believe that, by the way. Absolutely believe that. We know that occurs in instances of the government that are not nearly as covert, and multi-decade long NDAs are not uncommon. There is a plane that is my favorite plane. There's a model over there, but that's kind of delicate. I don't want to grab it. And it is called the YF-23, and it was the plane stealth fighter made by Northrop Grumman, and it went up against the F-22 Raptor for the best air-to-air fighter jet in the world in the 90s. And it was a public competition. It was not a classified project like many other aircraft programs are. And it took place in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. The top speed of that plane is still classified now. And that was a nothing like secret. Nothing, that doesn't even matter. That plane never even went into production. And its top speed is still classified. So, these things happened. That was 30 years ago. Over 30 years ago. 35 years ago about. Like, that's halfway to 80 almost. Not quite, but it's getting there. So, next clip. And Michael Shermer was basically stating on Twitter he was very unhappy that in the Steven Greer stream, there were illustrations that were done and provided to give context and to add to the story, to show, like, it was like having it's like what is that a criminal sketch artist, like that the cops use when you have a witness, and it's like, what did he look like? Did he have thick eyebrows and curly hair? And what was the skin tone? And then they draw it, and it's used not. It could be used as evidence, but not until after you find the guy. The criminal. It's not, or the suspect. You can't. It's not evidence outside of that. And so the same thing is true with these illustrations that are in the Steven Greer press release. And Michael Shermer had said on Twitter, he said, I guess this passes for evidence in the UFO community. Pictures that somebody drew of flying saucers, which is not evidence. Nobody claimed that was evidence. It's only evidence if you could find those exact craft. But if you find those exact craft, then you found, what you were looking for. You probably don't need that anymore. But so that. It's important. Like, he's not thinking about this in many ways in the right way, I don't think. And but I admire that he's looking into the topic. Like, I've always liked that about Michael Shermer. I'm not trying to just trash talk anyone here. I really think that the fact that he's even discussing it is commendable. So, but we have to understand what is evidence. What is evidence? Well, we have leads now, and maybe there is evidence that is classified. They claim that there is, and that it's been presented. Leads can turn into evidence, and there certainly has been leads provided, at least as far as all these whistleblowers have stated, and Steven Greer has stated, and David Grusch has stated. So that is really what's going to have to happen, though. You can't, if you're on this committee to investigate UFOs for this congressional committee and all these claims, you cannot just ask the Pentagon, is it, is this true or not? They're not. They're either they know and they won't tell you, or they don't know and they can't tell you. And so no matter what, you're going to have people who are trusted go and do the legwork. And ideally, it should be the people on the committee themselves. They should be going to the hills of Papoose Lake. They themselves should be going there. They should get the clearance. They should go take the plane to, from Vegas to Groom Lake, and then go and drive down to Papoose Lake and take a team and go and look at the hills there. You might even have to do some digging, literally digging. But we need people to go and look if you want to know the truth of this topic. And I honestly don't know whether or not, I don't have that strong of an opinion on whether or not this is even a good idea to figure out whether or not this is being hidden. I'm interested in it. I obviously would want to know if it's my instinct is I want to know if it's true, then I want to know about it. But I also don't know if that's a good thing or not either, and I will admit that. So we have to kind of think about that. But I mean, I think that the cat's out of the bag at this point. You trust in God and go and look for the hangers. Maybe you'll find something in them. But you have to look. There's no other way to do it. You cannot just look for program names and get stories, and somebody is going to have to go look, and it's going to have to be people that cannot be, bought, bribed, or threatened, and it's going to have to be groups of people probably who are directly responsible for making the determinations on the truthfulness of many of these claims who are on the Congressional Committee. And that means going themselves, because first-hand information must be prioritized over second-hand information. If you don't go yourself, it's second-hand information. And but here's the thing. Michael Shermer had said, how come there's nothing but blurry photos always? First of all, I have video of craft of some kind flying above Los Angeles, and it's not the most glamorous video, because none of these videos really are, but there is a pattern of what you see in many of these videos, and I wasn't the only one who filmed it, and we'll look at it later. There were 3 or 4 different people who took video of the same exact phenomenon and uploaded it to YouTube all the same day, and stated it was August 27th of 2021. There was something flying, and the more that you examine the footage, the more it is clear that whatever it is, either there are some serious optical illusions happening, which doesn't make much sense because there are flying planes in all of the videos that I took and that other people took, and there are these optical illusion issues that would be optical illusions if it wasn't actually, if the issues were not actually occurring the way that they appear to be. They're not occurring to those craft that are clearly planes. There are planes that fly underneath this object, and it's clearly not the same thing. So I'm not saying I know what it is. I'm not saying I know where they're from. I have no idea. That's not my main concern. But it clearly was something unconventional and that I had never seen before, and matched the description and video that has been pushed by many other people, including Bob Lazar's video, original video that he took above, Area S4, supposedly, when he was, on the time that he wasn't working there, and he took his wife out there, and he took John Lear out there, and a few other people, and they ended up apparently getting arrested for getting caught videotaping this stuff. And it looks a lot like that, whatever I saw. So there is video. There is, and people have seen real things, but at the same time, there are some photos out there that might be very good photos, and they're just assumed to be fakes. And so that's the thing, is when Michael Shermer says something like, how come they're all grainy photos? Where are the photos? Where are the real photos? Would you believe it if somebody provided you photos? I mean, honestly, maybe you'd be more likely to believe it. And should you be more likely to believe it? Depends on how many photos there are. How many witnesses there were. My video, what's interesting about the video that I took of Los Angeles is it's not just the video itself, because when you see something in person in the sky at night, especially like the moon, you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, that moon looks amazing. I'm going to take a photo of it and share it on Instagram. You take a photo and you look at it and you're like, that is so much of a letdown. I did this like 2 weeks ago when I was at my friend's wedding in Northern California, and which is why I was not here last week. I got back later than expected from that trip, but it was a very fun vacation with my wife, and I also went to go see some old friends of mine, and one of them got married. And while we were there, it's an incredible red full moon overlooking the forest, and we went to go take pictures and video of it, and all of us took pictures that were so underwhelming. And so that just because there's not great footage of something in the sky is not the point. But what is interesting about the video that I took is that multiple other people that same day uploaded video of the same exact object, and one of them filmed it just before it looks like it was just before maybe a few minutes, maybe like an hour before I had filmed mine, and it was just after dark. So and theirs was just before dark. But it is in their video they show where it is, and in my video I talk about how I had seen one there right before I had started the video, and then it disappeared, and then I show the one that I videoed. So there's multiple people that were seeing the same phenomenon, and were like, all of them said the same thing. In his video you can hear him say like, we never see UFOs or anything like that, we never are the ones to see anything really, but I don't know what that is, and certainly really odd. And they watched it. Their video is multiple minutes long, just like mine, and they said they watched it for a while before they even took a video. So it was an abnormal phenomenon, and there's multiple confirmation points, and that stuff does boost secondhand information. For me, it was not secondhand information because I saw it and I filmed it, but for those who examine the video, there's ways in which you can boost secondhand information, make it more likely to be that could give it more trustworthiness of whether or not it's confirmed by other sources. But the issue is today we have these sources that confirm things, and people will say, well, CNN confirmed it, and MSNBC confirmed it, and Washington Post confirmed it, and Fox confirmed it. But when you look at the news, and I have unfollowed basically all the news because of this, you can see that one of them writes an article, and then every other news source just cites the other one as the source. And so that is not what I'm talking about when I'm saying that if multiple sources or bits of information are all corroborating each other, then you can probably assume it's more trustworthy. That's not that. That is a different thing. They're all citing each other. If you have multiple different sources of information that are able to corroborate each other, that we're not aware of each other, that can boost it. But otherwise, but even still, it's just secondhand information to you. And so should you trust pictures? I'm not. I think honestly you should trust if it's presented as real, and there's no evidence to suggest that that you're aware of the story that explains it as being fake, then if you're trying to examine the topic, you do have to assume that it's real. You cannot assume that it's fake. I'm not saying that you should bet your life that flying saucer photo on Google Images is real. I'm just saying that if you're going to entertain this, if you're going to look into this topic, and your instinct is to assume that picture that has been presented is fake, you actually have to assume that it's true and look for evidence of it being true in order to logically examine this. But the thing is that you have to do that with any bit of information that comes in. You can't. It's not just that, if it's a picture, I have to trust it more. Guys, there are pictures of everything online. Like Photoshop exists. There's ways to fake photos. There's all kinds of photos that have been put out and then were later revealed most likely to be fake, of all kinds of things. So I don't know if just because there's pictures means we should definitely trust that it's real. I think that's interesting, but you need to have multiple. If it's going to be secondhand information, and you really want to put some more trust in it than just is for the sake of argument, then you have to have multiple bits of information that cooperate each other, and that takes time. And it's not just photos are not proof. And they could be evidence, but they're not even enough evidence. And neither is even video. Unless you took it and you saw it and you took the picture or you took the video, it's not enough. If you took the picture and you took the video, then it is enough. But if you didn't, then it's not, because it's still secondhand information. So they were talking about this. People have shown the pilot of the Nimitz encounter that was revealed by the Pentagon to be a legitimate video taken from one of their fighter jets, but of an apparent craft doing things that were just very odd. And he has said, we're trained observers. That pilot, David Fravor, he said that in a couple interviews I remember. That, you know, people are trained observers, but like that's not really the point. And Michael Shermer makes a good point here, is that people are flawed. You know, what you think you saw might not have been what you saw, and so we shouldn't trust completely in what you have to say if it's second-hand information. But that doesn't mean we should assume it is that you were mistaken either. If we assume that you were mistaken, and we are like, you know, doing a Mick West where it's like, no, he basically assumes that every single thing that people see has some other explanation. That is an illogical way of thinking. And if he isn't a disinformation agent, which I don't think he is, but who knows? It doesn't matter, like I said. Then he is definitely thinking himself into circles that is trapping him from branching out of that. Because he's waiting for something to convince him to break out of this circle of assuming that it's something else. But there is nothing that will come other than a first-hand experience that would break him out of that assumption. Not even photos. And here's the thing: if photos and videos and the president of the United States, it all came out, and the president was like, these photos are real. We really do have this craft, and this was the program, and it was here, and here's the bodies, and there's a picture of the bodies. Unless, if he were to believe it at that point, by the way, that's actually not a good way of thinking about this, because it's not due to multiple points of information all corroborating each other as far as he knows. It's just that the institution has now, taken a stance. And the institutions take a stance on all kinds of things all the time that turn out to be lies or incorrect. And just because the president says it doesn't mean you should believe it. Just because photos are released doesn't mean that you should believe it. But like I said, if you're going to investigate this topic seriously and your instinct is that this is not true, your default assumption is that this is not, or it's not true. It's that there are not, that the claim of the reverse engineering programs and recovered craft programs do not exist. Then you have to assume they do exist if you want to take this seriously. Like Michael Shellenberger said, if you don't believe in this, you should want to go check the hangars even more than the people who do believe in this. And that's the way that he's right.
Thread for you in your work, because I'm surprised to see you writing on this subject, is secrecy, censorship, cover-up. This is information that would be super interesting, important, world-shaking. Why are we not hearing more about it? Why are there...
Now, how do you respond to people who go, these are professionals that are used to looking at all sorts of crazy stuff, and they're saying that it's not that. It's, Christopher Mellon and Louis Elizondo and the Navy pilots and the Tic Tacs and the whole, they're saying these are experienced pilots, and they're saying these things were just too fast and they turned at right angles, and sometimes they go underwater. And how do you account for those people that have a lot of experience getting it so wrong?
Yeah, let me see if I can find that video I posted from the astronaut Kelly. I forget which. Oh, here it is. Scott Kelly, the twins there. He posted on his own Twitter feed a speech he gave in front of NASA, saying that you can't trust pilots and astronauts. They're not better observers than anybody else. He cites this example where he's up in the space shuttle, and the other astronauts are going, "Oh, look, there's a loose tool or a bolt in the bay. Oh my God, we got to get this thing before it hits something." And they start looking at it. They're taking pictures of it, and Kelly goes, "That's not a bolt, guys. That's the space station. That's 80 miles that way." And they're like, "Oh." Because it sure looked like it was really close, right? And then he has half a dozen examples like that, like pilots that are like going to dive down to meet their other pilot. Turns out it's a buoy in the ocean. They thought it was, something up in the air. He's got a bunch of.
So that happens. You have to remember that people are flawed, but you can't assume that is the case. It's not evidence that this is just a mistake just because other people have made mistakes. That's not evidence. Just like, was upset on Twitter that he thought that these, illustrations of these stories were being presented as evidence, which they were not. At least not, yet. But if you find things that corroborate that, then yeah, maybe then. But without it, going to these locations and finding these individuals and figuring out these programs, then those pictures are just illustrations. And but you cannot just assume that this is a mistake. Where does that go? Because how do you break out of that at this point? You can't. And there's a lot of issues that I've noticed on this topic, though. It's almost like God is like theism, because people have so much invested in it, and it has become kind of a religion to some people in a way, and either positively or negatively. Like if it exists, it's like emotionally overwhelming for them, or for some reason or another. Who knows what the reason is? Maybe it has implications to them about just their understanding of the world, obviously, in some way, whether that's their theological perspective or their, which I honestly don't think that's very common, that this has actually conflicts with people's theological worldviews, but it does happen sometimes. But then, some people just implies that they can't, that everything, if this is true, it's like the ultimate conspiracy theory. If this is true, then what isn't true, about conspiracy theories? And how do you trust the institutions and government ever again? Who knows what it is that's causing cognitive dissonance in so many people. But I've seen a lot of people, including people on the news, that are clearly like spiraling, and they do not want to, they want to deny the issue offhand without any like intense investigation. And you can't do that if you're going to take it seriously, actually, because the default assumption is that it doesn't exist because it's hidden. Unless you are a ufologist or whatever, then and you're super into this topic and you have been for a while, then you should be like, okay, I'm going to look to see if Roswell really was maybe Project Mogul, which it could have been. There's some evidence to suggest that there was a crash of Project Mogul, and that the crashed, or the debris that the famous pictures are taken of, it looks like it was Project Mogul, and not actually a weather balloon, which is interesting because the original story was that it was a weather balloon. It was only like in the 90s that it was stated to be Project Mogul. So it means that why would they give wreckage of Project Mogul to those people for the photos in the 1940s if it was just a weather balloon? It just doesn't, like, there's some evidence to support that there was at least some type of thing going on with Project Mogul there. That doesn't mean there wasn't other things that went on. There is evidence to suggest that there was also some type of exotic craft as well, not just the narrative. But I'm just saying, like, you have to approach this properly. It's not evidence that this is fake just because other people have made mistakes. And that's, of course that's true. That's not the point. But here's the next clip.
Be taking very significant risks in order to come forward with no apparent ulterior motive or psychosis. But bottom line, let's go take a harder look at it, and let's not be told that we can't go, into certain areas, and we just need a proper investigation.
Yeah. Well, my fear is that we won't find out, and it'll be for some national security reasons, right? So maybe someone like you will dig up and find out, oh gosh, you mean we actually stole one of Putin's spy satellites or planes, and we don't want him to know we did this, because, we're not supposed to do stuff like that. Or in the case of the WikiLeaks, that we were, monitoring Chancellor, what's her name, German Chancellor Angela Merkel's cell phones. Like, what? This is not good for business with other countries, right? So I suspect it's that our government is doing a bunch of shit like that we don't want people to know that that's what we're doing, because they have done stuff like that. And it's embarrassing when this comes out. And so my fear is that we won't find out, because it's something like that.
What's interesting is that actually what he's saying is basically what Steven Greer's main thing is that most of these craft, or at least a lot of them, are not non-human in origin. I don't want to say extraterrestrial, because who knows where they're from, but are in fact made by men, by humans. And Eric Weinstein has talked about this before, that our physics appears to be really artificially distracted, and that they were really working on quote unquote anti-gravity in the 1950s, and then all of a sudden there was just everything went dark, and everything was claimed to have never gone anywhere, and anybody that has claimed any kind of breakthroughs since then, like I think her name was Ning Li or Ming Li, from I think UC Alabama. She claimed breakthrough and then got a contract from the government while simultaneously it was claimed that her research led to nothing. Why would she get a contract from the government and from DARPA? I think it was from DARPA. And she quit her job, and nobody heard from her again until basically she died, many, many years later. I think she died at this point, but until very recently, like, her company was still up and running. So, there's a lot of bits of stories that do reinforce each other that are from separate communities, which is interesting on this topic. But I'm not going to get too into it. Like I said, we'll just go on forever, and I do talk a lot about it in my video on Eric Weinstein's latest Joe Rogan episode, and also in my video called UFOs versus WASPs, where I really do speculate about what these things could be and stuff like that. But what's interesting is that he, Steven Greer does claim that there's extraterrestrials, by the way, but he's just saying that there's a lot of craft that were human made and that we've cracked anti-gravity since the 50s, which is what Eric Weinstein said. It seems to be possible. And but there is conflicting information in a lot of these stories too. You have Bob Lazar's story where he says that they haven't really made much progress in understanding how these craft work. And then you have stories about alien reproduction vehicles, as they're supposedly called, that were powered by, I don't know what I think they said the vacuum, and they were flown in space for decades, and had been created in like the 60s or something like that. And then you hear stories about how craft they couldn't get a recovered alien craft to work on its. They couldn't figure out its own propulsion system, so they put a nuclear energy system in it, and then to power it, and then it halfway worked, but then didn't. And it's like none of these things really seem to make sense with each other. It's either like we figured it out, and we can access the vacuum. I don't know what is a good way of calling it. I don't put it in quotes because I am saying I disbelieve it. I don't know, but I'm just saying that's what people call it. I don't think most people know really what that means. Intuitively maybe, but not exactly. And if that's the case, then that contradicts what Bob Lazar had said, which is that we could not figure it out. And but then you have patents by the Navy being published that were from Salvatore Pais, and I did a stream on him, his interview with Kurchai Mungol that was very interesting, actually, that on basically this type of tech, which is, regarding the TR-3B type of craft, which is like anti-gravity. It's like a rumored anti-gravity nuclear-powered plane that I don't even know if you should call it a plane, but craft that supposedly was made by Lockheed Martin or something like that, and we don't know. But that is actually like much, Michael Shermer says my fear is that we just never find out, and I'm not really unconcerned with whether or not there are beings here that are of non-human or that are not human as we know it. I have thoughts about it. I don't think that I have mixed feelings about whether or not it's a good thing for us all to widespread know, that they're here. It could cause very unintended repercussions about and change how they would be dealing with us, actually. And because clearly they don't want us to know that we're here. It's pretty clear, like at least most of us. And maybe they have, allow some people to know that they're here, but not everybody. But as soon as everybody does, I don't think that this is like intentional by being allowed by them. To be quite honest, I think that the internet is just would be making this very difficult to contain. And but what does that mean for how they interact with us? I don't know. But the thing is that nobody is really asking that question. I did hear Chris Langan and Michael Knowles talk about it in their interview that the Daily Wire never aired. Until Ross Coulthart, he did ask David Grusch about this, and he said, has there been contact, basically? Are there agreements with these beings and the United States government, or private contractors, or whatever, this cabal of people who is allowed to know? And David Grusch said that he had heard that. I've heard that too, though, so who knows? It depends on where he heard that, on whether or not that is very interesting, because Bob Lazar said that, and many people have said that over the years, before Bob Lazar and after. And it is, I will say, that if you assume that it is true that we have craft that are in basically perfect operational condition, and not all of them are just smashed to smithereens, then you actually probably should assume that that certain groups of people have some type of agreement with them, because otherwise, how the heck did they get a perfectly intact flying saucer? Like Bob Lazar said, the one he worked on was in perfect condition. And if we assume that's true, even just for the sake of argument, then where did they get it? It didn't crash. They couldn't fix it if it crashed. They don't know. According to him, they didn't know how it worked. And he said it was in perfect condition. He said there were some there that he saw that were crashed, that were of all kinds of shapes and sizes and different states of, condition. But the one he worked on was in apparently mint condition. How did they get that? And he said the government told him that they had some type of agreement, supposedly a couple decades before he started, but that it was not ongoing anymore, and that there was an exchange of technology of some kind. I don't know. We don't know if this stuff is true, and this is not just secondhand information. Bob Lazar says he has no evidence of this other than what they told him. But we can make certain logical deductions about this information if you assume other bits of information are true. If you assume that he really did work on a craft that could do the things that he claimed that it could do, and it was in the condition that it was in, then that does actually support that second-hand story for us. It would be the proof of the craft would be firsthand to only Bob Lazar, and maybe his friends who he filmed it with, but they didn't get very close, but they saw something flying really weird, and who he took, and his ex-wife. But to us who were not there to see it flying over Papoose Lake in the middle of the night, or were not there to see it tested, or to see it on the lake bed or in the hangar, then that's all secondhand information to us. And it's like third-hand information regarding what he was told and didn't see. And so that doesn't mean it's false. That doesn't mean it should be disbelieved, but it should not be given as high of a... should not just give it as high of a prioritization in a hierarchy of information. You would prioritize first-hand, then second-hand, then you could say, I don't know if it would be called third-hand information at that point, but but I will say that you can start looking for bits of a cohesive story, which is why are these craft, some of them at least, in perfect condition? Not all of them. If they're also, why do they even have them? You don't think that these beings could retrieve what they had, and if they didn't have some type of agreement that allowed us to keep it, if they crashed it and then we recovered it and they didn't want us to have it? If you believe the other stories that they're turning off our nukes and stuff like that, then why wouldn't they be able to just take back what has crashed if they didn't want us to have any proof of it and nobody to know? No, it implies that there's some type of agreement that is maybe, I don't know how that communication would take place. Maybe it's, not very direct, but it's indirect in some way. But it doesn't, the fact that we would even have this stuff, especially if we have intact operational craft, it implies that, it seems to imply some type of agreement. There might be an alternative explanation, but that, as far as I can think of the decision tree going, that's what that implies. I don't know why they wouldn't take back the bodies, we do that when our people crash. Like we try and retrieve their bodies. You know, like so. Not always are they successful, but you know, it's usually the case. And maybe they don't value it the same way that we do for some reason, and that's very possible. But honestly, it's probably likely. But it seems to be like it could be likely. The more technologically advanced we get, the less we seem to value, you know, the individual human life or soul. And so it might be that they just don't care so much and don't want to risk, you know, more exposure. But if we do have craft that is in perfect operational condition, I doubt it's because they accidentally left it, you know, in the Walmart parking lot with the keys inside. And obviously that's like a joke, but still, if your goal is to be clandestine, why would you why would you leave that stuff around? And it could happen, but it's like, still, you'd think that it wouldn't. But there might be a lot of these things flying around, and maybe just if they are flying around, mistakes would be made sometimes. People keep saying, like, why would they crash? Mick West and I got into a quick talk a bit on his Twitter this past weekend, and I had said, he said, oh yeah, with all of our planes that fly around, you know how many planes actually crash? Like, and he was like 1 in 2009. And I was like, you're using just airliners, but not all planes. And, you know, that's a very different flight pattern and pattern of behavior. 2 pilots and a giant craft filled with a bunch of people, which makes it very, very important, and a pre-planned flight path. That is a very different accident, going to probably lead to a very different accident pattern than a small personal craft. You know, small personal craft crash all the time, always, all the time. And yeah, they would crash probably less than us. Craft are probably, if they're here, the craft are more advanced. But that doesn't mean they'd never crash. You know, if there's been 100 crashes in the last 80 years of small UFOs that seat 1 to 30 people, that's an extremely high rate of you know, success and of not crashing, probably. But depending on how many they are. But if you know, look at how many planes crash in the United States probably every day that are small. There's a few at least, I would think. I don't know, but I know that small planes crash a lot. I mean, I've seen small planes crash in LA since I've moved here multiple times. Harrison Ford crashed an antique fighter jet on a golf course, you know, in the last like few years of living here, and he survived. But you know, if it's common enough for that, I mean, Kobe Bryant crashed his helicopter. You know, like these things, people's craft crash. It's not that rare actually. So, you know, not every craft is an airliner. But Mick West was just like, well, I'm assuming that it's got the same accident rate or better than an airliner. It's like, why? Why are you assuming that? I don't know why you would assume that. And it might have a much better rate than that. It's just maybe there's so many of them. It doesn't matter. The point is that the idea that, oh, they just never would crash. No, of course they would crash at sometimes. You know, and who knows if we're shooting them down or something. That's not the point. But the point is that beings make mistakes. And, you know, some of them make less mistakes than others. And sometimes our tech is more advanced and it helps, you know, save you from your mistakes. But eventually, though, you know, someone bites the bullet or you know, has a crash in some type of vehicle. You know, people's cars are going to be self-driving pretty soon. They increasingly are. They have already started. And eventually there will be very few car crashes compared to what there are now. But there will still be some, because that's just reality. So this was an interesting clip that that I just think is odd. But Michael Shermer asks about Michael Shellenberger's religious views, and I thought that was an interesting question to ask.
Since you mentioned
Christianity and the effects that this might have. I was surprised to hear, I just didn't know because I don't know you that well. On Rogan, you said you had found Christianity. What's the story with that? Can you shed some light on that?
Oh, man. Well, do you want to ask a more specific question?
Well, yeah, sure, I do. Like, since you're a critical thinker and investigative journalist and so on with the facts and so on, do you accept that the resurrection of Jesus as a literal fact, or do you take it more as a metaphorical or a mythical? In other words, was there a carpenter? Okay, all right.
I just don't know. I don't know. There's so much I love about my Christianity and my faith, but it's messy, and I'm also an existentialist. I love Nietzsche, and that's a very a very paradoxical. Yeah, those are two very paradoxical thinkers. Yeah. So I would say I have. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
well, so
please
to
go
me,
ahead.
these are interesting. These are interesting issues because what should we believe is true? So knowledge is defined as justified true belief. Okay, what's justified? So, when you push, say, somebody on, do you really think that this carpenter from Nazareth named Jesus was crucified? Did he really exist? I think probably so, yes. Was he really crucified? Probably. The Romans crucified everybody for anything, so that's not unusual. Was he really dead for 3 days and he really came back to life? Now, that is an extraordinary claim. That's along the lines of we've been visited by aliens. Okay, what's the evidence for this? Not very good. In terms of just a pure Bayesian, let's look at the evidence. Well, the empty tomb, there's the eyewitnesses, this and that, yes, but, that's not particularly extraordinary. Post-death visions that people have all the time of their loved ones, that they hear their voice or whatever. Not that unusual. The sense presence of people that you love in the room after they're dead. This is not that unusual. That doesn't mean they're actually still there in some other form. Anyway, this goes on and on like this. And so, 100 billion people, this is how I think about it. 100 billion people lived and died before us. Not one has come back from the dead, except for maybe one. So it's 100 billion to one extraordinary claim. Is the evidence commensurate with that? I don't think so. Some other people do. But here, then a lot of my Christian friends say, Michael, I don't take this literally true. It's not like you're studying somebody's DNA or something. This is not that. It's a different kind of truth. Kind of a Jordan Peterson-like, mythic Joseph Campbell, the myth of the hero, the thousand faces, and so on. Okay, I get that. Totally. That's totally understandable. I have Christian friends that say, I'm not trying to prove anything. It's just what I believe. Okay.
Yeah, for me, and I've never been of the view that Christianity means this particular thing. It's much more multiplicitous than that. So for me, it was never like you have to believe that in the resurrection to be a Christian. That's one way of thinking about it. For me, I think one of the most important parts of my faith is that loving thy enemies is one of the most challenging spiritual quests for me personally, and I think for all of us. It's very hard to do that. It's very hard for me to do that, but I think that the effort to do so makes me a better person when I try and when I make an effort to do that. If you can love your enemies,
that's a great. I think that's true what he just said, but that's not. I think that you can deduce Christianity into core claims, but it not as specific as what most Christians would probably say. But it would be, is Jesus the Messiah, and is he in some way coming back and be going to is it, and what you believe about that is the details. It doesn't matter so much. Like he said, is this metaphorical? Is this literal? Is this historical? Is this predictive? And I think things in Scripture, if you take Scripture seriously, you have to take it seriously in all of those things. It is all of those things. Is Jesus' resurrection a metaphor? Yeah. If you take Scripture as true, then yes, it is a metaphor. Is it literal? Maybe. It could be historically literal as well. Is it going to be predictive about the future? Maybe. Yeah. If you're going to take Scripture not literally, seriously, then you have to assume that it is true on multiple levels, and but the details of exactly how you think something's going to happen, it doesn't matter so much. But I don't necessarily. I liked that he said I don't know, because I would have probably a more detailed answer, because I've thought so much about this idea of what does it mean for Scripture to be true. But at the same time, I think that was a better answer than most would give. I think that was very good. because it shows that you don't have to understand why something makes sense to you as far as Scripture goes, in order to understand that something about it does. So, but it was a good question by Michael Shermer too, because he's getting at a very important point: is what is true, but we have so many assumptions about how we can judge whether or not a claim is extraordinary or not. And he's like, nobody else has as so far as we know, risen from the dead, and so except maybe one. So, but the odds would be against Jesus then. But what if? But sentient singularity theory really, when you dive into its implications, it implies that probability it's a useful tool, but that's it. It's not actually like a truly fundamental existent phenomenon, and therefore, if it is true that somebody would be resurrected from the dead, and maybe it's true that only one of them can be, and that's it, and there is a hard limit on how many of them that would happen with, at least insofar as the way it's in the context of Christian story about Christ. But so maybe it could only be one person, and therefore it's like you can't just say, well, because everybody else has not, therefore it's not, the odds are not in his favor. It's like, that's not really how it works. People say this all the time with the UFO stuff too. It's like, even if the odds are so low that life is supported on some planet in some solar system, there's so many that like the odds are basically almost 100% that there's other extraterrestrial life out there. And this is exactly what Michael Shermer says when Michael Shellenberger asks him about this in this interview. He's like, how much do you think that, what do you think that about this, the possibility of life out there, even though you're very skeptical, or you don't believe that there is much evidence that the government is hiding a crash retrieval program or that these beings are here, then how much do you believe, what is your belief about whether or not they are out there in general? And Michael Shermer says basically almost 100%. He's like 99.9 percent belief that they're out there, but just pretty also very confident that they're not here is kind of how he acts, at least. And the reality is, though, is that there's no evidence that suggests that perspective is correct either. There's no evidence that is obvious that we can see around us that there, at least of the evidence that we would expect to see, that there is life on other planets. And also, the fact that life is here is maybe not evidence that there is likely to be life elsewhere out there, because if life is if Earth is perfect conditions for life, which is kind of what is assumed because there is life here, or life, there is cellular life here, we don't really understand, we've not really figured out what that means to life yet. But my dog is dreaming, and she's going like this, running in her dream. It's what's interesting is that if it's perfect conditions for life here, for cellular life, then why does it seem like all cellular life is related here? Like, that means that Genesis happened once on Earth. If the conditions are perfect, then why didn't it happen multiple times? And maybe it did, but we just don't understand what the evidence for that would look like. But with our current understanding of genetics, it is assumed that there is a common ancestor to all cellular life. But if that's the case, then why did it? It seems like there's some instance of Genesis that is a singular in nature, and that is implied by what we can actually see around us, supposedly, as given our current understanding at least. It's one Genesis of cellular life on Earth. That if it didn't happen multiple times here, why would it also be happening out there? That doesn't, it doesn't seem to make sense. Maybe it does, and we just don't understand it yet. But it doesn't seem to make sense with what we know, or what you would assume. I would think. Maybe only one person gets to come back from the dead. Maybe only one instance of in which a cell is formed, and one instance in which multicellular life would be formed. I don't know, but it seems to be suggested by the evidence that there is a singularity aspect of of some of these things. So, we a lot of times the way we think about things is not actually correct, and I think that part of that is because we are stuck in relativity when we try and think about things in terms of probability, and I would not really try and think about anything in terms of probability if you want to really understand it. It's going to probably mislead you, which is funny to say, but it could mislead you, and it might be even likely to do it. So you got to think more about it.
You're able to love your friends and love yourself and love the world.
So another thing that I hear all the time particularly from people in the UFO community is that like this stuff is being suppressed, these projects, because of there's like a bias against by people in the top level old men in the Pentagon who are just too Christian, and they can't entertain this, and they can't let this out because then people it might make them doubt their faith, and these people think they're demons, and they don't want to spread that around. So I don't see this in kind of phenomenon in my theological communities or my anti-theological communities that I associate with. Like, they all seem to be interested in the topic and entertain the idea of it being true, at least in some context. But I would say that most of the people that I know who seem to be most, I guess, like, aversive to the idea that there is a crash retrieval program tend to be anti-theists, not theists, anti-theists. That's probably due to the fact that many theists are on the right, and those people tend to really, at least right now in our current, political climate, tend to be the people who really don't trust the government nearly as much as people on the left, or our corporate institutions either. That could be just that could be the main explanation for that. Who knows? But here.
You don't need to know that because there's
the balloon. We can all see it. And there's the debris in the ocean. There's the Navy ship dragging it up, and so on and so forth. The President of the United States gets on the news and says, yes, this is true. The Pentagon says, yep, we shot it down, and so on. And it's covered by everybody. The story's over. It's done. That's what we need for disclosure. Really, just come on. Just bring it all out. So I support you on that. I completely agree. Don't care about the pilot. Who was the pilot that shot it down? What was his credentials? Where did he go to school? What kind of awards did he win? Who cares? It doesn't matter. We don't need to know that because there's the balloon. We can all see it. And there's the debris in the ocean. There's the Navy ship dragging it up, and so on and so forth. The President of the United States gets on the news and says, yes, this is true. The Pentagon says, yep, we shot it down, and so on. And it's covered by everybody. The story's over. It's done. That's what we need for disclosure. Really.
That does not actually make sense because, like I said, all these media corporations feed on each other. If one of them says it, then the other one says it, then the other one says it, then the other one says it. And they all just cite each other. They all just use each other's articles as sources. And you can see they literally steal quotes and headlines and stuff. And they all will have the same exact headline. And you can tell that there's just a mad rush to get out an article as quickly as possible. And so they just, piggyback off each other, and they'll say the exact same thing. They won't even look into the firsthand, aspects of the story. They'll just be like, according to the, I don't know. They won't cite each other overtly, but they'll be like, in this interview, so-and-so said this, and they're really just like reading the quote from another news source article that had the quote listed. So you can't rely on just the fact that everybody reports on it, the president says it, and the Pentagon says it, and therefore we're good. Do you know how much that happens? And sometimes that is false. Like, think about WMDs in Iraq. And who knows whether or not things were really there. But the point is that they said that they were there, and then they said that they weren't later. So it's like you can't trust. The point is you can't trust what they're telling you just because they told you and it came from certain sources. And because the media reports on it, maybe you get photos. Like, it might be disclosure, but it's not proof. First-hand information is proof, and we'll get to that. And it's not even the best supportive evidence either. That's secondhand. It's very flawed.
Bring it on out. So I support you on that. I mean, I completely agree. Congress, come on.
I never believed the stories over the decades that, they're hiding it because the stock market will crash if we find out we're not alone in the universe. What? Why? Or the society would fall apart, or, I don't see any of that happening.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very interesting question of what is behind the cover-up, which we know exists. Yeah, I've heard a lot of different stories over the years. I've heard that some of it is worldview, that there are Christian, devoutly Christian members of the military who are against it. I will say I've had a very interesting reaction to the piece I wrote. I have two very strongly Christian friends, one of whom was fine with it, and the other one was very upset. I have some atheist friends similarly. So I find the reaction very interesting.
There was a study done about 10 years ago on a poll of just asking Christians and Buddhists and Muslims, Jews, atheists, whatever, how would the discovery of an extraterrestrial intelligence, say through the SETI program, or we made contact somehow, affect your religious views? Almost everybody said it wouldn't affect it at all. I mean, our God can do whatever he wants. There could be life, fun, all over the place. So what?
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. So maybe it doesn't have anything to do with that.
I think more likely if I could
what's your working hypothesis, or how would you sort of probabilistically assess what's going on? How do you account for these high-ranking, high-security clearance people? Do you have sort of theories?
I do. I think you're on the right track when you write here, for example, your different sources. One source described having seen 3 kinds of craft, including one shaped like a triangle and another that looked like a chopped-up helicopter, with the front bubble of a Huey helicopter with the plastic windows, or more like a deep-sea submarine with a thick piece of glass, bubble-shaped, and where the tail rudder should have been, it was black, egg-shaped pancake, and instead of landing gear, it had upside-down ram's horns that went from the top to the bottom and rested on the ends of the horns. Okay, what in the world is that? Well, okay, let's, again, take off the table what you said at the top. These are not mentally ill people. They're not punking us. It's not a hoax. Okay, what could it be? Well, I've argued in my other Quillette piece that it's probably not extraterrestrial just because the distances across interstellar space are so vast. The chances of them finding us and coming here over and over and over, pretty slim. It's more likely to be either our own secret technology that they're just not inclined to tell us about, like the U-2 spy plane or the SR-71 Blackbird, or what actually happened in Roswell, which was this Project Mogul of launching these high-altitude surveillance balloons with microphones, listening for the acoustic signatures of Soviet.
Listen how he says what actually happened. By the way, I'm somebody who will admit that the photographic evidence does kind of suggest that at least there was a Project Mogul crash potentially, but I also think that there's many reasons to believe that that might not have been all that happened. And so, but he says it so authoritatively. We know what actually happened. Why do you know what actually happened? Because the Air Force told you what actually happened? They lied to you about it for 70 years. It was in the 90s that the Air Force, admitted that it was Project Mogul. And you still just take their word for it. It just doesn't make sense. And, we know. Well, really, did you look at the crashed evidence? Were you there when it crashed? How do you know? And, because the military first said it was the military base that reported they had recovered a crashed flying saucer. And multiple people saw the wreckage, and all of them described it as very odd. And, I doubt that these people were idiots. They were not going to find tinfoil and balsa wood and stuff and alone and think that, wow, this is a flying saucer. But maybe it was one thing hit another one. Maybe something hit Project Mogul balloon or something like that was exotic. I don't know. But the point is that don't assume people are morons, because that is not going to lead you anywhere. If you found a weather balloon outside crashed, you would not be like, that's a flying saucer. And neither would they. People were not dumber in the past. They were wiser in the past. These people lived next to the military base. It was the only nuclear capable and cleared military base in the world. It was very, very competent people in general who were there. Who are people? They're capable of making mistakes, but come on. That's many people needed to make mistakes for that to issue a press release that said, we've captured a flying saucer, or recovered a flying saucer. But then later, very quickly, later on, they said, no, it's actually a weather balloon. Who makes that mistake? It does. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I am saying don't assume that is a mistake. That's pretty wild too. You're basically assuming that that you shouldn't listen to anybody ever, which is that doesn't make sense. But then it's inconsistent. So for then the military to be like, 90 years later, oh, actually it was Project Mogul, we were lying to you. Who knows whether or not they're not still lying to us? Maybe they've told us part of the story and not all of it, and maybe it was partially Project Mogul, but not entirely. So just the way he's speaking about this stuff, it's a trap. Richard Dolan, who was a historian by degree and profession, I guess, and writer. And then came across documents that implied that the government was hiding the existence of its awareness of UFOs. Now, those documents, there's many, many documents of that is the case and that are able to be legitimized. That doesn't mean that they explain anything about them. It just means we see things in the air that we, not us. And that's still happening right now, Look at the New York Times article and what the Pentagon has been saying for the past few years. So that's nothing new, but it convinced him to look into the issue, and he became actually increasingly convinced that there is non-human entities here with operating technology that is more advanced than ours. And I tend to lean that way too right now. Actually, not even actually. I saw, Richard Dolan saw something too that he describes his experience of seeing like a craft in the sky, and I did, and I filmed it, and we'll show it on this stream at the end. And we'll show other people's video of the same exact object as well. It like you to just assume that people are idiots is it kind of traps your mind. And Richard Dolan, though, my point is that he'd said once in a podcast that I heard him put out, and I do recommend his channel, Richard Dolan, YouTube channel. I discovered him a few years ago when I delved into this topic, and I think he does a very good job of approaching it fairly soundly, and responsibly, I would say. And he said that from the people that he's met over his lifetime and his own personal experience, that if you didn't have your worldview shattered at some point usually in your like early 30s, late 20s, then you ended up growing up and becoming like locked in your ways and not able to think about new possibilities, about things that you had old assumptions on in any kind of real, coherent and honest and humble way. It was, you either just adopted the opinions of the the media that you were consuming, or you just stayed stuck in your ways. And either one is probably not. Neither one is a dynamic person. The other one of them's being led like sheep, and the other one is, digging their heels into the ground, like maybe a sheep that doesn't want to be moved. But neither one is like a kind of implies a critical a trend of way of being, or not critical, but I guess like humble and like reflective way of being, dynamic way of being, animated way of being. And I definitely would agree that I think that he's right. Kind of in my own life, I've had this experience personally, and in many ways, I was an anti-theist. I was an atheist, but really an anti-theist. Till I was 24, and that worldview rocked my world, and that is the reason why I ended up kind of not rethinking, but entertaining ideas as at least as topics that I didn't understand as much as I realized that I didn't understand these things as much as I thought that I did, and that was enough, on many of these things. So I don't even sit there and assume Bigfoot is fake. I don't assume it's true either, because I don't look into it. But I will say my instinct is that it's not something that I should be concerned about. And that's it. I don't know what my thoughts are. I don't really have any thoughts on it, but it's, I no longer assume it's fake either. Like definitely assume, maybe it's my default instinct, but it's not something that I like. I will criticize anybody for believing in Bigfoot. I don't have any experience with the topic. Why would I have a strong opinion on it? But I recognize that I have a default assumption because that's the way that is how people think. You cannot have a lack of opinion on something. You can be kind of confused and admit that I don't really have a strong opinion, but this is my leaning. But you can't have no opinion on something that you're already starting to like think about a little bit, even if it's just mentioned to you. But unless you are totally unaware of it, you can't have no even like assumption that's kind of instinctual. But I don't have any assumptions on Bigfoot beyond my instincts, which that doesn't mean anything to me because it doesn't matter because I don't look into the topic. But you have, I've seen this in people that I know though that never had this like worldview change. And honestly, I've tried. This has happened to friends of mine, and we're no longer friends. Not because like I don't like want to be friends. I really was upset about it. I went back to Arizona a few times, and I met up with some friends of mine, and I had just realized that they had not grown in a way that I had grown. I'm not saying they didn't grow at all. I'm just saying they didn't grow in the ways that I had grown. They still thought they had the world like figured out more, and it wasn't even just that I didn't think that I had figured it out. It just I had just realized that my capacity for ignorance, and they had not realized that yet, really impacted us on a kind of odd, kind of holistic way. I'm not going to say that we got into an argument or anything like that. That's not true. It's just like, just realized that we were not in the same place. And it was not because I went back and shared my opinions on like UFOs and they just thought it had gone crazy or something. It was just like we didn't have the same capacity to exercise humility in thinking about certain things in certain ways that were really against our instincts. So, but you can't to assume it. You can assume that this stuff is government projects, but that is a lack of, some of it. That's not the argument. Like everybody who is actually pro UFO tends to think that there's also government projects being done that would appear sometimes to be super advanced technology that might make us think that it's of non-human origin. That's not the question, is whether or not that exists. Everybody agrees basically that exists, just to different levels. That doesn't mean everybody believes that they've cracked anti-gravity, but some people do. And so I don't think that that's actually a legitimate kind of like thought that he has. I'm not saying that it's not, that it's illegitimate. It just means like it's not relevant to the discussion, actually. Like it's presented as if it's an explanation, but it's not actually, it's not relevant to this because it's exactly what everybody else thinks too, on both sides of this.
The analogy that wokeism is like a religion,
and John McWhorter makes the analogy that the anti-racism BLM movement and so on is kind of a religion. I think that's right. But it does make me wonder if we kind of structure our worldviews in some way that ends up being like religion, including religions. It's just something in the human cognition that leads us to do that.
Do you, and Michael, do you think of yourself as somebody having a faith?
Not a faith. No, I'm a secular humanist or enlightenment humanist or so on. The atheism part is irrelevant because atheism is not even a thing. It's just a word that I don't believe in God. And it's even that saying it that way. It's like, no, I just have not been convinced that there is a deity, but I would change my mind. But that doesn't define what I think about, civil rights and women's rights and gay rights and animal rights and, the moral arc expanding and so on and so forth. That has nothing to do with atheism. And, so I've written...
Interesting statements made there. Many interesting statements, because for one, I agreed with this first statement that basically there's something built into the human cognition that is, and when he identified like fascism and anti-racism and wokeism and whatever these things mean, they end up being kind of suffering from the same dogmas that they are accusing the other, that they're projecting onto the narrative that they're claiming to fight, and they suffer from the same exact issues that they claim to be fighting from. The reason why, and I've talked about this before, is because you can't have an anti-ideology. And I drove by an elementary school near me recently, which is for another stream, but there was a pride flag flying on it above it today. But it wasn't like just a rainbow. It was like the rainbow one with like the triangles that represent like all kinds of other things, including, people of color. And it's like everything. It just basically they're including everything that isn't what was at least considered by them, not even by the, by people outside of that community, but by that people inside that community as being the normative. It's like white, cisgender, like heterosexual people. Like, it's like everything is included in that flag except that, which makes it means it's like an anti-ideology. And it's not, there's nothing, people have been saying over this month that, that movement seems to be very akin to like religion. And there's reason for that. And there's also a reason why anti-fascism is like very fascist in the way that it acts, whereas like libertarianism acts very differently, even though it's basically technically saying the same thing. We don't want to be controlled, but one of them is a positive ideology. We want liberty. The other one is we don't want fascism, which is you can't do that. That's the same exact problem though with the disbelief in a topic that you're trying to really like delve into, and you're coming to certain assumptions with, but you're not believing in an alternative narrative, and then secondarily believing, being against, kind of emergently being against a certain topic. It's that you're fundamentally defining the perspective by being against something, which is the same thing with the UFO topic. It's this idea. That's why you'll see this kind of really like inconsistent logic with people who are like a Mick West or something. It's like he's like, well, and even Michael Shermer. It's like they assume that people who believe in this stuff believe in anything that they hear, and that's definitely not true. There's a lot of infighting in that UFO community, I've noticed, and it is often about whether or not you think that some people's claims are correct, and but they'll say things like, well, those people, they'll just believe in anything, but it's like, but if all you do is disbelieve in everything, if like your default assumption is it is fake, there is nothing there, there's no there, it's like it could be a screw floating past a space station, and not a screw floating past a space station right outside. It's a space station, another space station that is way far away, 80 miles away, and just looks like a little screw. And it's like, but you're like you're believing that it could be that, but there's no evidence for it. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But like to say, well, it could be that, means like you're technically adopting that as a belief, but without evidence. It's like, well, there's it could be that the government is just doing tests with classified projects, and that's what it is, and that's what I believe it is, which is basically what he just said. which really in the context of this discussion, which he is having, just means nothing. It doesn't answer the question because everybody believes that anyways on all sides of this. And Steven Greer spent half his time speaking. He spends the majority of his time speaking about supposedly classified anti-gravity vehicles that are human-made. Steven Greer doesn't even think that the Tic Tac UFO is. He thinks Lockheed Martin made that. He doesn't believe that is a UFO that is that is non-human in origin. I don't know if he's right. I have no idea. But the question is it moving with unconventional means is the main interesting thing to me. Then we can start getting into who's driving these. But you can't. But this conversation and the claims made by David Grusch is. I feel like it's halfway between Grusch and Grusch, so I'm really struggling with it. My apologies. I'm terrible with names. But it's like then the claims are that they're recovered craft of non-human origin. So what do you... when Michael Shellenberger says, what do you think this is to Michael Shermer? You can say, I believe that it is... that there are craft of non-human origin. Maybe some of them are, secret government projects, but some of them might... he could assume that they are of non-human origin, some of them. But then or if he doesn't, then he could assume that this is like a disinformation campaign for some reason, but he has to have some type of evidence that supports that disinformation campaign that he's believing in, and that disinformation campaign has to basically imply that the idea of craft being recovered of non-human origin the story is not true. It can't be mutually compatible story. So that's why this is hard. It's hard to not have I disbelieve in this, because it doesn't. You can't not believe in something. You always must believe in something. But he said this in this statement that he made, Michael Shermer, and this was correct. It's good that he's thinking about this. Is maybe there's something in human cognition that makes us kind of have this religious searching for the religious narrative. But he's wrong about where to start. He's putting the cart before the horse in this, where he's maybe we have some kind of inclination to turn things into religion, like wokeism or the Pride movement or the anti-fascism or UFOs or Christianity or Judaism or climate change, whatever. And he's maybe we have some type of inclination to believe in have some type of religious beliefs. It's not that we have the inclination to have some type of religious beliefs, even though I think that you got to dissect what that means, and maybe some of what that implies is true, but it's that you must believe in something. You can't approach any topic and say, I have no belief in it. That's why I've said before, there's no atheists. There's no agnostics either when it comes to God. You can be agnostic about other things if you don't have experience with them. But maybe you could be agnostic about a certain religion, but God, I'm defining here as sentient existence, an initial sentience that is responsible for the creation of the universe, or that we are all within, that is an initial singular sentience. Or maybe you could say even a sentient universe. That is how I'm defining God. You can't be agnostic about that idea because you interact with reality every day. Do you assume that it's sentient and that it's working for you or not? I had something happen to me today where I needed something done by a specific time, and I had scheduled a dentist appointment, and I canceled I was something's telling me I just can't go to the dentist appointment. I need to cancel it and stay here and get everything done. And because it's, I don't know, I just felt it. I ended up canceling the appointment and working on what I needed to work on, and my day ended up unfolding in a way that was like less than a minute of synchronicity. I had things done like and was there when I was needed. So meetings arose that were scheduled for the wrong time for me, and I ended up like being there right at the perfect minute, down to the minute, less than a minute actually, of when I needed to be there. I would have never made it if I had gone to this. And so people, they see those types of things and they're like, you either think, oh, that is really lucky and there's nothing that caused that, but there's no one that caused that, it was just really lucky and that's it. Or you see that moment and you're like, thank you, God, for, making that work out. And whichever one, or you say, thank you, universe. But if you fall into one of those two camps, and but with other things like, UFOs, you can be agnostic about UFOs only if you don't investigate the topic. But you cannot be Michael Shermer and be agnostic about UFOs because he investigates it a lot. And I will say, for it being something that really you think is total nonsense, like you really invest a lot of energy into it. Same thing with Mick West, and you see this with people who are like, I don't know, trying to like Richard Dawkins and stuff when it comes to God. It's like, if you don't believe, you're seriously like investing a lot of effort into countering nonsense. And don't chase chickens with their heads cut off. If you think something is nonsense and people are chasing nonsense and they're just chickens with their heads cut off, don't chase them. But he did identify, correctly kind of focus on this statement of like something about human cognition that makes us have these beliefs, but it's not just religious big beliefs like UFOs and God and certain moral ideologies and political ideologies. It's everything, but those are the ones in which we notice it the most. So he's right about that in some way, but he's, like I said, he's focused on the big things instead of it being like a fundamental aspect of human cognition in its application to everything. And he's kind of assuming that it's some aspect of human cognition that's detached from the everyday, but is focused on, the big, that somehow like needs an idol for the big picture. And that's incorrect. Dennis Prager used to talk about this too, and so many other people have. It's like, men who don't believe in something believe in anything. And it's usually used to mean politics and God and stuff like that. But it's not just that kind of stuff. It's like the littlest things that happen and that throughout your day that people tell you or whatever. Everything in school that people tell you in lessons that you can't confirm. It's like, you can't not believe in something. You have to believe in something. So it makes it very hard to approach this topic with the viewpoint of skepticism, because as much as there is evidence, a lack of I don't want to say there's a lack of evidence, but as much as there is convoluted evidence that there is that the claims are legitimate of there being non-human entities that are technologically capable around us, and that the government or corporations have the proof of it somewhere, recovered craft or whatever bodies, that there's also just as much convoluted stuff on the side that would imply that there's an alternative story. So like Project Mogul was classified for 70 years, and any aircraft out of Area 51 that they're testing that are just planes that maybe use really classified incredible engines or something like an SR-71, but the modern version, like in Top Gun Maverick, where he's testing that Dark Star plane, like things like that. That stuff is highly classified too. So you can't just be like, oh well, I actually believe that it's this, and then that these sightings are in Area 51 are of the Aurora spy plane. They're not of that's a classified spy plane, supposedly. They're not of a UFO. It's like there's just as convoluted evidence about the Aurora as there is like recovered UFOs. So it's tough to use classified projects as alternative narratives to another accusation of a classified project. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense. It's not. That's why you kind of can't, because unless you are aware of that classified project, or you have so much corroborating information that has really allowed you to build like a narrative about why it's that instead of this. But usually that doesn't really work for UFOs either, because like I said, everybody that believes, the people that tend to believe that there are non-human entities that have, around us with technology, and that the government has, or groups of humans have recovered their craft, are the same ones that also believe that like that have the most likely to believe in the accused classified human created technologies as well. Like they're the ones that are most likely to believe that we have anti-gravity craft. They're the ones that are most likely to believe that the Aurora spy plane, hypersonic spy plane, existed. There isn't, and that's because there isn't an incompatibility of these narratives, and because of that, you can't use, the Aurora or the B2 or something like that as even unclassified stuff at this point as kind of counter narratives. You can't be like, "Whoa, I think people saw the B2 and they were just mistaken." People believe in the B2, and so why can't you believe in both? Like it's like it doesn't counteract, or it's not a legitimate alternative viewpoint. So this is tough though. Thinking about this stuff is hard, and this is like anything can be like this, but it is especially difficult with classified projects, especially classified projects that you are assuming that are allegedly coming from humans and also not humans. So it's like, how do you figure that out? That's why it's such a complicated and confusing and frustrating topic. But then he says this.
Quite a bit about this, and he was trying to show that this is something different.
And the atheism movement, it's even that's weird. It's like the movement for what? It's just like how many times it used to be this like atheism of the year award. It's like, who gets that? The person who didn't believe in God the most. I really, really, really didn't believe in God this year. Okay, you get the award. I mean, it's just kind of a crazy idea, right? But I do think something like, Sagan's very spiritual way of describing the cosmos in his famous series, Cosmos, the universe is all that is and ever was and ever shall be, here, and he's standing on the cliffs in Big Sur, just down the street from you. And, these magnificent views and the waves crashing. And it's like this existential, thought deep. This is everything, it's like, yeah, I mean, you just get tingles, as he said, tingles down the spine, goosebumps, just thinking about it. That's kind of a religious, I don't know, spirituality, whatever the right word is, not faith, but just, there's something. I suspect, like you just said, 1,000 years from now, we're going to go, oh, so that's whatever it is, right? Then it's like, okay, right. Now I can see that, we're not alone, that this is what life means in context of these larger things that we now know that we didn't know back in the 21st century. And, that.
So first of all, like I said before, it's not to see the beauty of the world and think about the cosmos is not something that theists don't do. I did that as an anti-theist, and I do that as a theist. Grand Canyon is amazing. I went to Big Sur and looked at the waterfall, from the cliffs, and was like blown away by the beauty of it. And that happens to me all the time now. I just notice just more mundane things, I think, to me now seem so more spectacular. Like little things where I'm like, I don't even know why God would value that, but it like instinctually you're like, God, he's so great, and why would he value like helping me get, I don't know, some like hobby, something to do with some hobby of mine or something that's so mundane. And then but you might see an instance in your life that makes you think that he acted in that specific moment. And that I will say is like some of the things that like blow my mind now. It's like God in the seemingly mundane, that he cares about the littlest thing and the biggest thing. He seems to, and at least to me. But I've never stopped caring about, seeing profound views either. It just still invokes like feelings of beauty and stuff like that. So that's not an alternative to belief in God, which is the belief in a sentient, initial sentient creator, that we're all within, but or that that existence is fundamentally a singular sentient being. That would be belief in God. That's not contradictory to nice views making you feel emotions, and also, he explains exactly what I'm trying to get at with this. Like, we need to change the narrative. The idea that atheism is a thing is very wrong. It is causing so much confusion in many different, in more ways than we can probably imagine, across many fields and ways of and parts of society and parts of your life. But when he says atheism, how can there be an atheism movement where you're just like, you're the guy who believes in God the least, basically? And like, he's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, atheism, he's implying atheism isn't a disbelief in God, it is a lack of belief in God. It's like a non-opinion. But you can't have that. And that's why everybody who claims to be an atheist will argue against the existence of God. They won't say, well, I've never seen any evidence, but maybe, and I don't really have an opinion on it. No. Like, that, you can tell in their actions, even if they do say that is not the case. Some people claim to be agnostic, and you can tell that they really do believe in God. They just don't want to think about judgment, because it freaks them out, which implies that they probably lean towards belief. But atheism is not it doesn't make any sense. It is a terrible word. It's probably one of the worst words ever created, because it describes something that fundamentally cannot exist. And that's why, when you hear Sam Harris and them, people like that say, oh, atheism isn't a disbelief of God, it's just a lack of belief. Like, I've never seen convincing evidence. But then the way that they act reveals, like, they do not believe. It's not even like they have a disbelief, is what it is. Like, their belief is that of rejection of the idea. It's not unconcerned. It is absolutely concerned. But because of the nature of the impact of the idea of theism would have, and it's just entirely far-reaching in every aspect of your life. It doesn't mean that you definitely believe a certain thing if you're a theist. It just means, like, it impacts how you look at the world if you're a theist versus an anti-theist, and it impacts how you look at everything. I can tell you, as somebody who was a self-described atheist but really an anti-theist until they were 24, and then had a total shift due to logical deduction and a lot of thought about the nature of existence, and so not convinced by Scripture. I was a theist before I believed that Scripture was that before I looked into Scripture at all. I was already a theist. So but when he can't even say, a movement of an absent opinion of theism. It's like, no, that doesn't exist. It is a movement of a lack of belief, which really is a way of saying a disbelief, which is really saying, I believe that God doesn't exist. You don't say, I disbelieve in the existence of God, really, or you don't say, I have a lack of Or you don't say, I have no opinion on the existence of God. Nobody says that. And if they do, they're lying. To themselves, most likely, more than anyone else. So I'm not like judging them for it, but they should be very self-reflective if you make that claim. I don't care what you say to me, but tell yourself the truth. And if you tell me something, it should probably be what's true anyways. More consistent you are, the more thinking you can do that's coherent, because coherence is coherence. But he can't even say it as in the terms of the concept that he's trying to get at, which is like a lacking of any kind of opinion on the subject. It is a movement of a lack of belief in God, which is really it's not a lack of a belief in God. It's a lack of belief in God. And so nobody says, I have a lack of a belief in God. No, you say, I lack, belief in God, which means like you disbelieve, which means you believe that God doesn't exist. So it's just interesting, like these types of lessons apply to any subject really, but theism and anti-theism have special considerations. But if you're really looking into a topic, like you really need to realize that you cannot have no opinion eventually, especially if you put in as much effort as Michael Shermer, and that some things that you think are beliefs are actually not beliefs. They are just pure rejections without actual evidence to the contrary. Like the evidence that what you think is evidence to the contrary is not. Like the idea that government has classified projects, classified planes is not evidence to the contrary of it. Also recovering non-human created craft.
That's my best argument for being chronically frozen and brought back, just to see how it
Turns out.
Oh my gosh. And do you and would you what probability would you give that we are not alone in the universe in the sense of being conscious, intelligent beings?
I would put it at close to 1. That is maybe 99% probability we're not alone. Simply because of the law of large numbers. You just crunch the numbers of how many galaxies there are, hundreds of billions of galaxies, each of which has hundreds of billions of stars, almost all of which have planets, so that means there's trillions and trillions of planets. So no matter how low the probability of having the right size planet, the right distance with the right amount of temperature and water, and the first proteins and self-replicating molecules and all the gazillion steps between bacteria and big brains, no matter how low that probability is, when you have trillions and trillions of opportunities, it's just going to happen. Somebody's going to win the lottery, right? So I would say, I support the SETI program. I support the Galileo project to look for these artifacts coming in from outside the solar system. Yeah, because they probably are out there.
There's no evidence of that. That is a belief in something with zero evidence. The law of large numbers is not evidence, because if you want to look at like the patterns of life insofar as we can confirm, it appears like we all have a common origin, which implies Genesis happened one time on Earth, which supposedly has perfect conditions. Like the assumptions he's operating on are not consistent with the evidence that actually exists. He's putting the faith in probability above actual evidence, even within the assumptions that he has. I'm not saying that it's wrong. There's no life out there. I'm just saying there's no evidence. And you can say I believe that there's life out there, but like to say that you believe it because of the odds doesn't appear to be a logical argument, because it's based on it's not even based on it's based on nothing but its own sake, which is probability's sake. You can't base things on probability's sake. Like, not like that. and if you want to base it on evidence, insofar as we understand about life here, even, you can't just say, well, we exist here, so it must have probably happened somewhere else. No. We have a common origin here, apparently. And if that's the case, then it implies that there might be a singularity to the creation of cellular life in the cosmos, because that at least appears to be the case here. Like there's a lot of ways in which we think about things that is just flawed. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of it, and I am guilty of it. I'm human too. I have a lot of progress, of a lot of practice thinking about things that are, outside the bounds of everyday life for most people, or maybe super fundamental to everyday life, but unnoticed. And I have a lot more, experience in trying to understand thinking than most, because that's what this project, Sentient Singularity Theory, started with, which is what is a mind, and how does it process information, and actually in a way that orients itself, like that grabs onto something fundamental and doesn't just operate in relativity, which is exactly what probability is. It's a relativistic view of the world. It's an unbacked and endless view of the world. So I would not operate on probability with any of this stuff. You can't say, well, the government has hidden stuff from us before, so the odds that this is also, existing, probably. You can't say that. You can be like, well, yeah, we shouldn't trust the government because they have a track record of lying. We shouldn't just trust the government always, intrinsically at least, but that doesn't mean you also can't trust the government ever, because they've also told the truth. So so you have to find something else. You have to find a way to think about this that is not based on probabilities, because that's not thinking about it. Actually, you have to find things and say, based on this, my assumption of this being true due to this, it has multiple unrelated bits of corroborating evidence, and or it can be, soft reasons as well. I will say the Steven Greer press release, the Whistleblowers and Steven Greer at the beginning, but also the Whistleblowers at multiple points of their stories, multiple ones of them started crying. Steven Greer was crying when he was talking about how what this meant to him to turn over all this information in this context that we're currently in, and he was very emotional about it, and I do believe it seemed legitimate. And so, does that convince me that does it add to their story? Maybe a bit, but it makes me just take them. It makes me think that they're being honest about what they think was going on. It doesn't convince me of what they have said exactly as their interpretation being correct. But I also don't think that their interpretation is wrong either. I don't know. I'm just saying it seems like there's something there. I'm not saying it seems like there's nothing there, because I don't know, they drew pictures instead of bringing photos. No, it seems like there's something there. What it is, probably has multiple explanations. Maybe some of it is exactly what is being claimed. So this is, like I said, this is a very tough topic, and I actually think it's far more difficult than the God discussion. I think the God discussion is actually super simple. It's just been overcomplicated because people are arguing over specific religions instead of whether or not just existence is a singular sentient being, that's actually extremely easy to argue. It's one of the easiest things to argue, actually, I think. But this is harder. And there's so much at play, and so much more that could be at play, that people are intentionally misleading others, and there's stories of the government intentionally misleading people into thinking that what they had uncovered was alien because they had come across classified projects that were not that we're human in origin, and I believe that probably. Like I don't have a reason to not believe that, and so like disinformation is a real thing. But what's interesting is that and this was really great, is that Ross Coulthard asked about that. He asked the David Grusch, how are the non-human entities going to react to humanity becoming aware of them? That is a very good question. And, there's a lot of assumptions that you would have to make, of different assumptions to entertain different possibilities of that. And I went into it on my stream, UFOs versus WASPs, if you want to look. But I think we can assume that for now, these beings do not want to be known if they are here, and that implies certain things. I think, like that they would be using us for something, probably. That might have implications on how they react to us all knowing. I don't think we're doomed because of aliens, or Atlanteans, or whatever you believe they are. It could be one or the other, or both. People from here that are from a previously advanced civilization, beings from another solar system, time-traveling humans, like, who knows? It could be all of these. Could be none of them. But I think that to take this subject seriously, you do kind of have to assume that that some of this stuff, some craft around us are operated by and built by a non-human, an intelligence that, or beings that are not human as we understand it, at least. Doesn't matter if they're from Zeta Reticuli or from the center of the Earth. Not yet. But there is a logical way of also looking for evidence if you are in the government, and it is not, it cannot end with getting someone to tell you something about a project. It has to end with you going and seeing it. Like, if you're in charge of coming to the bottom of this stuff, you have to probably personally get permission to go and investigate certain locations and see what you find. And you might not find anything. You might find evidence of that there was something there and that's been hidden, and that is consistent with other stories that have been told. You might find empty hangars, like I said, in the hills above Papoose Lake. You might find filled hangars with advanced fighter concepts, or with recovered flying saucers, or with nothing and empty. Or you could find rubble buried in the dirt of a demolished complex that has been replanted to make it very, very discreet. But you probably would be able to find some stuff even if they had tried to hide it. But probably they would do a thorough job if they wanted to cover it up. So you can't just it has to be a multifaceted approach, but it is going to have to be a first-hand approach, and that is how you come to understand anything truly. So, with that, did Jesus make a quantum measurement? I don't know what that means. What you mean by that? Did Jesus make a quantum measurement? If Jesus is the Messiah, then Jesus understood reality more than anyone else. I think that he would have to, in order to be the Messiah. So, I don't know what it means to make a quantum measurement in the way that you're describing it, but maybe you can elaborate in the chat. I will show now my video, and it kind of describe like why this is good secondhand evidence of something, and even though it's not a good video. And so there's something about, there is some things in the video that are very interesting, but we'll look. So, for instance, though, here is a friend of mine sent this video, and he took this with night vision goggles, and I haven't asked him about the story in a long time, but it was last year. A good friend of mine, too. And And so just look at this. So you don't know this guy, so I'm not telling you to trust this as not being altered, but I know him and I trust that it's not altered. So very interesting now. Watch.
You're getting the idea. Whoa, you see that? It just went to there. You see that? That wasn't it. The fucking thing just stopped right there. You're getting the idea.
Do you see?
Whoa, you see that? It just went to there. You see that? That wasn't it. The fucking thing just stopped right there.
This is not someone that he does not believe that like little green men are from like that there are beings from other solar systems. I don't think he even believes that. So like what he thinks this is not probably conventional idea of aliens, but he did see this, and I believe that video is unaltered. I'm not swearing to its authenticity. I'm just saying that's odd video, if you believe that that is an unaltered video, which I believe it is. But that's not the one that I'm showing you that is really good. This is the one. This is my video that I'm going to show you that is good. And the reason why it's good is because it's corroborated, and other people the same day took video of the same object, and you can hear me talking about in this video what I saw prior to actually hitting the record button, because we're driving down the 134 and I saw out the window hovering above downtown LA, I saw the brightest light I've ever seen in the sky besides the sun or the moon. And it looked just like Bob Lazar's old videos and stuff of the tests above Papoose Lake, and I've seen other people's videos of UFOs, and it looked like that. And so I immediately recognized that I was with my wife. I pulled out my phone, and as I looked down to pull out my phone to hit record, the one was above downtown LA, like it seemed to like disappear, and then it might have been that it reappeared instantaneously as the one that you'll see off to the left of the car. My wife was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and or it was just a separate one, and one of them disappeared and the other one did not. But it happened so quickly and instantaneously that it's a little confusing to whether or not this was the same craft or a different one, whether or not there was two to start and one disappeared and the other one stayed there, or whether or not one of them, there was only one and it was above downtown LA and then it was down above Eagle Rock, like immediately. So here you go. So there's a UFO. Right there. There was another one. It's super bright. There is a plane next to it. There's been planes flying around it. It's not a planet. I checked Skyview. It's hovering in place. Skyview is an app, by the way, that I have on my phone that's very good. It shows you where the planets are in orbit, and also all the space stations and satellites and stars and everything. And I checked to see if it was like Venus or something, and I knew it wasn't, but I double checked just to make sure. I know when Venus and Jupiter and Mars and Saturn are all in the sky. I can see them, and I know it's them even without the app at this point. But what's interesting about this video is you'll see it off to the left side of the car while we're driving. We're heading west, and then what you'll see is that it disappears and I lose it. And then when it comes, when I find it again and I point the camera at it, it's not to the side of us, it's in front of us, and it's way far. It was where it was like almost parallel with us before. So you see right here, this is facing south. I'm looking south. My wife is driving west, and here's the mirror on the car, and this is the front windshield, and I'm facing out the side of the front windshield. There was we're traveling. One. That's it's super bright. There is a plane next to it. There's been planes flying around it. It's not a planet. I checked Skyview. It's hovering in place. See, I've lost it, and but then we'll find it. Like, do you see how much that moved from here? It's here.
It's super bright.
And to anybody that knows exactly where we are, the odds that this is a trick of the light is ridiculous. I have driven... This road was part of my commute, and I understand that you shouldn't just take my word for it, but just understand that my reason for confidence... First of all, I grew up next to an Air Force base. I've seen all kinds of stuff. I could tell you every fighter jet that the United States has made after 1950. And more countries than just the United States, but I can tell you exactly what it is called. And I've seen every kind of plane that you can imagine. I've seen it that is declassified. Most of them I've seen flying. And and I, in LA, we have helicopters every day flying over us of all kinds. I know what helicopters are the police helicopters, which ones are which police departments, because they have different kinds around us. One of the police departments here has what's called a NOTAR helicopter, which means it doesn't have like a rotor on the back. And I know like that helicopter versus the LAPD's helicopters, which use the same kind as the news helicopters. And I know which ones of those is not also, private helicopters of some kind, or military or Coast Guard helicopters, or even the medevac helicopters that the hospitals use. I know all of these. I see them every day. I see blimps all the time, and this road was my commute. And I would be driving down this road every single day for over a year and a half, exactly at this time, in the exact same direction, at the exact same spot probably at that time, every single day for over a year and a half. And I've seen everything hovering above downtown LA, from blimps to helicopters to... I've seen fighter jets flying out of Burbank Airport, even, which is weird sometimes. So I know, aircraft. It's kind of a hobby of mine. But it's possible I was mistaken. I don't want to say it's not likely, because I don't want to invoke probability, but I will just say I am good at identifying aircraft. So this was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't. It was extremely obvious in the sky. It's not doing any justice to it, this video, of how big and bright this light was. Just like videos and pictures of the moon, of a full moon that you take at night, and it just looks pathetic. It's not even worth posting to Instagram. But in person, it was like, awe-inspiring. That's how this was. But watch this move from the left of us, of our car, which was south of us, because we're heading west, to in front of us, which means like it moved westward, like miles, in like that, guys, like that. That's why I lose it.
There's a plane next to it. There's been planes flying around it. It's not a planet. I checked Skyview. Right there. There was...
You can see it's behind the trees and the road. It's not a light from a car. It's continuing to stay right there as we're moving. It is not, it's not a headlight from a car. It's traveling. It's further away, and it also may be traveling with us. But right here, I wonder if that is it moving. In which case, watch it move. Okay. I don't know what that was, though. I can't. It happened so quickly.
It's super bright.
Right there.
It's super bright.
Yeah, that was it. Oh man, I can't get it. It does appear. There it is. It does appear like it's moving. And it appears to be moving ridiculously fast.
There is a plane next to it. There's been planes flying around it.
It might not have been that. It might have been a light from there. I don't know.
Planet.
But
checked Skyview.
These are all lights.
It's hovering in place.
And obviously I didn't confuse these with that light because, you'll see, I find it. And it's clearly not A light
That's
on the
it.
road.
I
It moved
am
from the side of us to that, and I wonder if that is it right there. I don't know though. To all the way, way out in front of us. In how many seconds? From 7 seconds.
It's super bright. There is a plane next to it.
It's
There's
already
been
gone.
planes flying around it. It's not a planet. I checked Sky.
So in less than 5 seconds.
It's hovering in place.
Because it's not there. There it is.
That's it.
You'll see a plane fly under it in a minute.
I am convinced it's a UFO. There was another one too, and it disappeared. It's literally hovering. It's literally hovering. But it's a UFO. There was another one too, and it disappeared. It's literally hovering.
Can I move this? Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's what I was trying to see. Look.
There was another
There we
one
go.
too, and it disappeared.
So we can see it.
It's
there.
literally hovering.
And I think we'll be able to actually see it's moving. There it's moving. It was hovering and then it's moving. So it's like there.
I am convinced it's a UFO. There was another one too, and it disappeared. It's literally hovering.
It's still like not really moving much, and then now it's clearly moving. Like if it wasn't moving at that point, then what would happen is we would continue to see it, I think, but like it's clearly accelerating faster than us, and it's disappearing behind a building. This is downtown Glendale. For those who are
But there was another one above downtown LA. We were driving by, and I saw it. It looked the same, and it was weird because
Here, listen to what I'm
there
saying
was like.
here.
But there was another one above downtown LA. We were driving by, and I saw it. It looked the same, and it was weird because it was like a light was shining from below it and above it. Like it was like shooting up into a V. The light.
So you hear me say there was another one above downtown LA. At least at the time I thought that it was two. I don't know if it was or one moving, jumping, or if it was two. I don't know. But at the time I thought it was two.
I don't know.
There it is, right there.
But there is a plane below it. You can see one, right?
And it's harder to
That's
make
the
out the
plane right
difference
there.
here because it's of the video. But I'm telling you, in person, there was absolutely no confusing these two things right here, this and this. In the video, sure, but not in
But
person.
there-
This was way brighter, more than 10 times brighter.
Plane
Easily.
below it, you can
the other
see
one,
one,
you
right?
could see in person. You could see the flashing lights on this, and the way that it was flying, it was a plane.
That's a plane right there. That is not a plane. Above it, like it was like shooting up into a V. The light.
There it is. That's a plane.
I don't know.
That's not a plane.
But there is a plane below it. You can see one, right? That's a plane right there. That is not a plane.
There's no blinking. It's just constant
That is a
glow.
UFO. It's still there. Just hovering. And I thought it was at the top of the mountain, but that's the top of the mountain.
That's the top of Griffith Park.
There's no mountain over there.
You can see where we are. So this is a very interesting video because the more that you study it, the more you realize it is not behaving naturally. And the next clip was posted the exact same day, and it is. I'll show you it posted on YouTube so that you can see that I'm not, even though I did download it, just so that I have it. I'll actually include the link in my description, but So this is secondhand information. It's not very good video. We weren't there for it. I was. You have to take my word for the fact that it was so abnormal. But, just it's not every day that I take a video of something in the sky and then blows me away. It's actually never happened before. So, and I will say, a few weeks later, maybe a month later, I was getting ice cream with my wife, and there was what looked like a similar thing, or maybe another one, hovering above, like, the Burbank, Glendale area again, and it was at night, and I reached down to grab my phone to pull it out, and when I did that, I looked, and I saw it vanish, and what's crazy is there was a helicopter, and it was probably a police helicopter, that was hovering near it, like looking at it, like it was like pointing lights in its direction and like trying to. It might have been a drone, who knows? I didn't get long enough to look to see whether it was that unconventional or not, but it was clearly something that it looked the same, I will say, and the police helicopter was looking at it, and I would need to try and figure out exactly when that happened, but I think I have it recorded because I think I saved the receipt from the ice cream so that I remember the day that it happened, because I was planning on contacting the police department and seeing like if they had, what they had encountered, but I ended up not doing it. But it was so quick though, it was like a second, so I can't say it was the same thing, but it looked the same. But it vanished right before my eyes, and then the helicopter, it looked like the helicopter was like, where did that go? Because they were like searching after that. But this video is the video that someone else put up. And there's two videos that were uploaded as supposedly being UFOs in the LA area on August 27th of 2021, which is exactly when I took my video. And it looks like this video, this first one, was taken just a couple, maybe an hour or two, or maybe less, 30 minutes before my video was taken, because mine was taken right before sundown, right after sundown, like minutes after, because we had just finished taking wedding photos, like secondary wedding photos. We were redoing our wedding pictures because my suit never showed up to my wedding. And we did that in Pasadena, and then after that we went and picked up dinner. We didn't eat it there. We were just picked it up to bring it home, and we were on our way home when we saw that light and filmed that video. But this so it clearly takes place before then, because the sun is still up, and also the craft they're filming is hovering above downtown LA, which is exactly where I say in my video I saw where I first saw a craft, or whatever it was. And so that bit of information does corroborate my story, and I don't know who took this video. They're not a friend of mine or anything like that, so I just searched on YouTube UFOs on August 27th over LA. So, and this is the video. So on the first channel, we can see this is Chris Conley's video right here.
Good.
UFOs over Los Angeles, 27th of August, 2021.
Good girl.
But yeah.
Where'd it go? Okay.
It's right there.
So
and we joke that we never see a UFO.
Good
it
girl.
seems like everyone else does. Well, this morning we have coffee, and we
Come
did
here.
have it.
Come here.
So watch this though. Here, just so that we can really slow it down, I will use a recorded one. Where is it? Oh, we'll just play it here.
Good girl.
Where'd it go? Okay.
It's right there.
So this is a terrible picture.
Good
Good girl.
girl. Oh, good girl.
Notice the plane. It's not a plane, guys. That's a plane. That is not. There's so many things in the sky of Los Angeles. There's so many planes. There's so many helicopters. There's so many blimps. It's like it's literally crowded. I was driving home from work the other day and I was looking in the sky and I was like, there are so many. It looks like an air war or something. There were so many not fighter jets. There were so many planes in the sky. It looked like a bunch of like an air battle. There was so many, and so we're not used to seeing things. Like, look at that plane. It's obviously a plane. So this is taken in the daytime. I don't know exactly the time, but it was not. It was before mine. So.
Where'd it go? Okay. So this is a terrible picture. Good girl.
Good girl. Good girl. Come here. Come here. Good girl. Oh, good girl.
So that plane just flew right by. It's a terrible picture, but we've been following this thing for like 5 minutes probably. And it started way to the north of us. The thing is, if it was a balloon, it seems like it would go in one direction. But it started north, came south, then headed east a ways, and now it's heading west. Downtown is right over there.
Same. It looks in a similar area, obviously.
Oh, that is not a helicopter.
At first we thought maybe it was a helicopter and we were catching a reflection off the windshield. Then we thought it was a balloon, but if it's a balloon, it feels like it would move in one direction. I don't know.
If it was a balloon, then why would I see it glowing as the brightest thing I'd ever seen in the sky at night? And it's still the brightest thing in the sky in the video that I shot. So even though it doesn't do it justice, like, it's the same day.
We always watch these shows on TV and wonder what it would be like if we ever saw something. This is the first time when we honestly have a question about what the heck it could be. We're looking at it with binoculars and it sort of undulates around like it could be a balloon, except that it moves in weird directions.
It's not a balloon because it has lights on.
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. We've been watching it for about 5 minutes.
Okay, so, I'm not saying that we know what that is, but I'm saying that we know that there's something in the sky above downtown LA that glows at night and hovers and moves around in weird directions in weird ways, and is unlike anything that we've ever seen. It's definitely not a plane because you can clearly see planes next to it in both my video and his. This is also, this was another video that was posted online of UFO on the same day, and this one is different. This one is supposedly from the shore of near the beach of LA somewhere. I don't know where, but it just said Los Angeles, August 27th. And it is also in the daytime, and it is a metallic orb that appears to be hovering above the water. This person who, I'll list their YouTube channel below, but they also pulled the other video that I just showed you and put it in this video, so that they were making a list of this sightings on the same day in the same location, and so.
Я тебе говорю, вот видишь, посмотри, это не птица, это шар какой-то. Смотри, какая птица.
Drake, August 27th, 2021.
Ну где же птица?
They're speaking in Spanish or something. I don't know what.
Сразу видел крыльями, где ты видишь крылья машет?
But look at that. Like, what is that? That looks like the videos that have been provided by the Pentagon as being unidentified craft that they've found in Mosul and stuff. Like, what is... And it's over the water, which is just... It's another pattern. But... I'm not saying we know what it is, but I'm just saying it's clearly something that's moving in a way that is very abnormal. It's not like moving like it's a balloon floating in the wind. It's very odd. But see, this video is not very shaky and not clear. Like, it's clearly, like, from a distance, but it's also pretty clear that there's an actual object there. It's not a light in the sky, and it's supported by the two light in the sky videos, mine and the other guys, because it's the city and the same day, that we're now all, 3 people are seeing this. And so I'm not saying this is accurate. I don't know if it's true or real or fake or whatever, if there's issues with the details. Just saying it's supported by the other videos that I showed. One of them, I have firsthand knowledge of its legitimacy because I took the video. But I bet you that if I showed this to Michael Shermer, he wouldn't think much of it. So it's like, well, send us the videos. We just need the videos that are good, not just lights in the sky. Well, here's one, and I don't think it tells you much more than we already have been told and been seeing. But then this person goes and shows this guy again, Chris Conley, same exact video I just showed you with, there's the plane flying, and they see it hovering above downtown LA. Very odd. So, secondhand information is not proof; it is evidence. First-hand experience is proof, and if anything is proof, it's first-hand experience. That's true of everything, including this topic, and including God, including everything, anything that you think you can know. And you can't really know it unless you experience it firsthand. So I don't know what these beings are, where they're from, or what the origin of these craft are. But I can tell you that there are craft that exist and move weird ways and fit certain patterns because I have experienced it. And you have not, maybe you have, but not. You were not there with me for that video when I filmed it, but you've seen now 3 bits of corroborating evidence that are not being reported by the same people. So this is why it's so tough, even in this community, the UFO community, of like when people say, "Oh well, I was told by a source that there's reverse engineering programs and that they have at least this many and this stuff." It's like. And then you have the writer for the New York Times said, "Oh yeah, I believe David Grusch because my sources have said the same thing." What if they all have the same source? That means that I'm not saying that they don't have separate sources, but what if those guys are all pulling information from the same story? We don't know. It certainly is evidence. It's leads, but we need to think about what evidence is. It's not probability. And then also there is a difference between first-hand and second-hand information, and there is a way to boost the confidence in second-hand information. The fact that information is experienced, if it's experienced firsthand, is experienced firsthand, is all that it needs. But second-hand information needs more, and it doesn't. It's not probability, and but it is never going to be proof, no matter how many photos, many videos, how many stories you hear. It's never proof if it's not firsthand. So it doesn't matter how many agencies tell you something, whether or not the president says it, whether or not Michio Kaku says it, and so it's important to just know your goal with a certain subject. How do you want to know something? And then determine whether or not that's even possible. And but if you're in the government, then it's the same exact thing, and you're trying to investigate this, see if this is really being hidden. You have to do it by finding first-hand, not first-hand evidence or of certain details. Maybe like you go to a hangar that's now empty, but it was exactly where a guy said, and it's hidden and it's in a weird spot, and it doesn't look like it's designed for, I don't know, there's no runways or something like that maybe, which is like, why would you have a hangar with no runways? But you until you can actually see exactly what you're looking for, see bodies, see craft, see it even operate, you don't know. But you have to go and find this stuff firsthand. Cannot rely on asking questions to people who have not given you answers yet. And it doesn't matter what answers they give you, yes or no. It just means, you have to you're still going to have to chase the lead, do the legwork. And that's true of basically anything we want to know. So that's it. I'm going to call it for the night. I believe there was clearly a flying humanoid with an LED strapped to its back. The purpose being to warn planes, helicopters, and drones not to run into it. That's funny. You know what is funny? Torin, there is a... It looks like a man that has a jetpack. There's video of it on YouTube of like the jetpack man in LA, and nobody knows who this is. They don't know if it's really a man with a jetpack or if it's like some type of drone that is made to look like a man with a jetpack, because the stunts that it pulls, it means that like the jetpack is very impressive, and they just like fly off the coast of Los Angeles sometimes. So there's like weird things in the air around here, but what's funny is even though there's video which appears to be a man with a jetpack, they don't really know if it's a man with a jetpack or if it's a drone that looks like it's a man with a jetpack, because if it is a jetpack, it's a very impressive jetpack in its performance. Like it's been sighted at like, a couple thousand feet or something like that in the air, which I don't know of any jetpacks that have ever been tested to that height. But I don't know of drones that have been tested to that height either. So it's very odd. And I've seen videos of it. And every few years, the jetpack man shows up or something. Whatever it, even if it's a fake man. But I don't know what it is. I think it's a real dude that who's just doesn't. He's just very brave. And but because I don't know who made that jetpack. Like you can't buy that off like the shelf. Like you probably have to build that, or somebody has to build that, and there's no companies that you can like buy a jetpack from other than I think Gravity Industries has like the ones that look like Iron Man now, but you can't even have it with you alone. Like you just buy it and then they take you flying in it and then you have to give it back. It's like owning a Ferrari race car. You don't actually ever get to put it in your garage. And it doesn't look like this, but it's very odd. Let's look it up real quick and then we'll go. Jetpack Man LA. Look at this.
This morning,
Is this mysterious jetpack flyer at it again?
Possible jetpack man in sight.
A Boeing 747 pilot reported seeing the flying object near LAX last night. The sighting triggered a cascade of alerts from the control tower and a comparison to the superhero movie in an armored suit. Last night marked the fourth sighting of an Iron Man flying over the LA flight zone in recent months. This video was taken 7 months ago. Jetpack technology is developing at warp speed.
That's Gravity Industries, but that's
not. The British Royal Navy,
like he doesn't fly high,
is taking last night's report very seriously.
And the Jetpack Man has been sighted very, very high.
It's one of LA's most intriguing and dangerous aviation mysteries we've reported on, but we may finally have our first glimpse of the infamous Jetpack Daredevil. This is video from a pilot capturing what appears to be the elusive Jetpack Man flying off the coast of Palos Verdes at about 3,000 feet elevation.
3,000 feet, guys.
Since October of Jetpack Guy, after a string of airline pilots reported seeing someone on a jetpack flying near LAX. There are now ongoing FAA and FBI investigations.
That's the mystery I want to know. Who is the Jetpack Man? How does he have this and nobody knows, and it hasn't like gotten out that like, oh yeah, my friend has a jetpack. Oh yeah, my friend's friend has a jetpack, and he flies at 3,000 feet above LA. Like that's wild. That's a way crazier mystery to me than like even the Bob Lazar story. Okay. Ask any final questions in the chat, and I will get to them before we go. But this I have so much footage that I wanted to show you of the Steven Greer, press release, and honestly, I think that it's worth watching. I'm not saying anything about it other than I think that the people are being genuine, and I think that it's a new moment where Steven Greer, I feel like he's always saying, oh, I'm going to turn over all these documents. We have all this information. And everybody kind of gets frustrated, I feel like, it seems like he doesn't ever turn it all over. But it It seems like he did turn it all over, actually, finally. He was like, this is the result of over 30 years. He was like, I'd like to thank my wife. And he was like tearing up and clearly very emotional. And told everybody there that he was doing this. And he did offer the information, actually, the unredacted lists to the media. It said it's freely available to them. But to the government, it's already been turned over to members of Congress. The unredacted version with people's the only thing that was redacted was like people's names, and that's like action. You gotta like look at who's putting their name on the line, who's actually trying to provide information, seems to be like not open to just, I don't know, people looking into things, and it seems like everybody there was very much open and willing to put their name on the line, and seemed very cogent, and even Steven Greer basically putting his name on the line by saying, we actually turned all this over. It's not just we have the information and I can't show it to you. He's like, we can release this to the media, just it's redacted but with names, but then there's an unredacted version that we provided to Congress. It's like, for him to say that means that some Congress people probably know. I mean, I do trust that he's being honest. And same thing with David Grusch. He said, I've turned over documents, that were provided to me about, secret programs. And I think that is a new thing other than Bob Lazar. I don't think that this has ever really happened. But Bob Lazar is different because Bob Lazar is not claiming to know people who have been in these programs or have heard of these programs. He claimed to be in the programs, and like I said, I do believe him. But he was. It's very rare that we have somebody that appears to be. It's very hard to appear to be reasonable and claim that you're in a reverse engineering UFO program. I've seen people on Gaia that I think I saw like a clip of like some guy, and it was on like Gaia's YouTube channel or something once, and I think I got it as an ad, and he was basically just saying it was like Altered Carbon meets Starship Troopers. Like, he would go to Mars, his mind would go to Mars in a different body and beam him there, just like mind to a different body, and he fought these beings and aliens, and that there's partnerships and tons of aliens over there, and there's a war going on that's like a ground war being fought with AR-15 rifles or something. He didn't say ARs, but he said rifles of some kind, some type of rifle that I've never heard of, and it's either a classified rifle that's used on Mars or it's a fictitious story. But I will just say it was like extremely fantastical, and maybe it's true. I don't know. If they have anti-gravity tech, who knows what the heck they have. But if these things are here and they've had agreements, as David Grusch has said, he's been told that there were agreements made with humans, and there was a guy who, and Bob Lazar was told that as well, but this is some very interesting evidence, actually, but there was a guy who, what's his name? He was very famous. Gary McKinnon. This is him. And he's born 1966, Scottish, systems engineer and hacker. He was accused of hacking into 97 United States military and NASA computers over a 13-month period between February 2001 and March 2002 at the house of his girlfriend's aunt in London using the name Solo. U.S. authorities stated he deleted critical files from operating systems, which shut down the United States Army's Military District of Washington network of 2,000 computers for 24 hours. McKinnon also posted a notice on the military's website, "Your security is crap." That's so funny. After the 9/11 attacks in 2001, he allegedly deleted weapons logs at this, rendering the networks of 300 computers inoperable. I mean, he claims that this was accidental, this stuff, I think, if it did happen, but That's very funny that he did that. And I've seen the interview he did with Richard Dolan on Richard Dolan's YouTube channel. I highly recommend watching it. Their security was crap. How he broke in, guys, was he just wrote a program that tried to see if to get into the computer you just hit enter without entering a password. Like when you're on the password page, you just hit enter instead of entering a password, or it would just enter password as the password. And like he only got into computers that this worked. And a lot of them were just the password was password, or there was no password and you just hit enter. And that's why he says the security is crap. But he describes how he did it, and it was like, it's not like he was like, oh, you wouldn't understand, I'm just such a hacker. He was like, no, I wrote a program that just like tries to enter password as password, or hit enter. Like that's what he did. But it says here, he did admit to leaving a threat on one computer, where he said it was not a mistake that there was a huge security. He said, I am solo. I will continue to disrupt at the highest levels, something like that. U.S. foreign policy is akin to government-sponsored terrorism these days. It was not a mistake that there was a huge security stand-down on September 11th last year. I am solo. I will continue to disrupt at the highest levels. I don't know if he wrote this stuff or not. I don't remember if he talked about it in his interview, but what's interesting is that even on here, there's nothing said about what his story really was. Said this: statements to the media. McKinnon has admitted to many public statements that he obtained unauthorized access to computer systems in the United States, including those mentioned in the United States indictment. He states his motivation, drawn from a statement made before the Washington Press Club on May 9th, 2001, by the Disclosure Project, was to find evidence of UFOs, anti-gravity technology, and the suppression of free energy, which he states to have proven through his actions. He stated the Disclosure Project that they were very credible, relied upon, and saying yes. They've captured spacecraft and reverse engineered it. He said he investigated NASA photographic experts' claim at the Johnson Space Building's Center Building 8 images were regularly cleaned of evidence of UFO craft, and confirmed this, comparing the raw originals of the processed images. He stated that to have viewed a detailed image of something not man-made or cigar-shaped floating above the northern hemisphere, and assuming his viewing would be disrupted owing to the hour, he did not think of capturing the image because he was bedazzled, and therefore did not think of securing it on screen capture junction in the software at the point his connection was interrupted. So basically that's what he says in Richard Dolan's interview, is he said while he was staring at this picture, somebody realized, because he was mirroring the screen, and so somebody saw like the mouse moving and stuff who was there, and he then saw that like the mouse started moving and then like logged him out and shut down the computer. And then he got arrested. He didn't get arrested. The U.S. tried to extradite him. They wanted to put him away for decades, guys, decades. And in the United States, they just called him the 9/11 hacker, which, like, you know, according to the interviews I've seen, it had very little to do with that. It had to do with looking for evidence of this stuff. And he found evidence of fleet-to-fleet transfer logs, he said, of ships that don't exist in our Navy, and of, like, bunch of people, like, being transferred from ship to ship. And it was at NASA, I think. And so he thinks it's for, like, this secret space program of super advanced tech that kind of would, if it's true, is maybe more supportive of that crazy sounding guy from Gaia who claims that he, you know, fought on Mars or something. I'm not saying I believe that guy. My instinct is to not, but I will say that there is very odd things that support this stuff. And his interview was great with Richard Dolan, like I said. And Theresa May, I think, was the Prime Minister of the UK, I think, at the time. And she had said she refused the United States extradition order. And I wonder if it's because he told them things that he's found and they wanted to know. Because, like, why else would you refuse that, really? Like, they claimed it was because he had autism, and, like, he didn't know what he's doing. But why would you care enough to defend him? if he really hacked into the United States like networks and stuff, and was really like just trying to be a cyber terrorist due to hating the U.S. government, why would Theresa May fight for years to keep him from being extradited? It's very odd, and I don't know what to make of this subject sometimes, but I do think that there's. It seems to me, I'm convinced that there's something there, and I have my own speculations about what the nature of it is. But I don't know for sure, and I do know something is around us because I filmed it, but I don't know, the details of reverse engineering programs, because I will say it and admit there are conflicting narratives about how far along they have gotten in reverse engineering if they have tried it. And that is kind of like, it's those types of inconsistencies that just matter to, how confident you are in certain stories. But I think that it's my point is originally is that it's very, very hard to not sound crazy when you're talking about certain topics. And you have to remember that when you listen to somebody who's talking about making a claim that is very, very abnormal and outside your everyday experience, they're going to sound crazy to you, and you have to just assume that. Like, you can't be like, well, he sounds crazy and he sounds sane. And once I was in a Discord community and they just were asking me all these questions about like Tyler, do you have mental problems? Are you schizophrenic? Like all these questions about whether or not I was crazy because I claim to be working on fundamental theory and I don't have a degree in physics. And even though I can perfectly explain how this project came to be, and it wasn't intentional either, but they were like, you do realize how arrogant it sounds for you to say that? And I was like, my response was, there's no way to claim that, even if it's true, and not sound incredibly arrogant or insane. There's no way. And the UFO topic that's true too. There's no way that for you to be like, I was on a reverse engineering program, or I, witnessed one, or I saw, bodies in the basement of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Like, there's no way to make these claims and not sound crazy to the mainstream right now. And so, no matter how wild something looks, that's not what matters at this point, or sounds. What matters is, can we get details from their story that can be looked into as legitimate leads, and that we can confirm in some way, shape, or form, or that we can try and confirm with firsthand investigation, not just through verified documents or other people's testimony, but like, can we go to the hills above Papoose Lake and look in to see if there's hangars there, and maybe see what's inside them. But so that's that. I believe that it was clearly flying humanoid. Okay, decades ago, myself and a friend chased an 8-foot diameter paper white sphere down the train tracks. I don't know what that is, but that sounds interesting. I've seen that too. Went pretty high. Could be all the drones and paper mache. Yeah, that's what people claim about the jetpack man. It has some amazing hair. What if it's a jump and not flying at all? I don't know what you mean by that, but I'm going to call it because I think that this has been a very long stream. I don't know, but like I said, I had so much footage that I wanted to go over, but the Steven Greer thing is 4 hours long. I wanted to go through Kirchheim Mungel's video recently about UFOs that he did. I haven't even been able to watch it yet, but I will. It's hard to find the full interview of David Grusch, but I think that you should watch it, and if you can, it's out there to find. I'll try and link it below, actually, if I can find a full version on YouTube. But it is also on News Nation, and it is good. But just be aware of, when you approach this topic, how to think about it, and there are ways to think about it in a logical way that allows you to keep your orientation in the subject, so you don't just dive down any rabbit hole and got swept up and you now believe in anything that you hear, or you end up like Mick West is, and you're just like chasing your own tail and just disputing everything because you can't break out of a logical trap that you've put yourself in. So that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was somewhat coherent. I just honestly, there was just too much footage for one stream, and we'll continue to talk about this topic over time. But with that, I will see you next week. There is a Discord call, by the way, tomorrow night on our Discord. If you'd like to join our Discord, private message me on Instagram or Twitter at my personal Instagram, Tyler Marshall Goldstein, or my Theory of Every0ne Instagram, and I will send you the link. It is at 7 p.m. Pacific time every Thursday. It's an open call, but we also just have text channels in there and stuff. It's a great community, but you do have to ask me for the link, and I will give it to you if you ask. But I will be back next week. Peace.